14th, and we do have a quorum, so I will call this meeting to order. Board member Wallen Friedman is not available to join us tonight, and board member Gabler is joining us virtually. So just a reminder that when we do have a board member that's virtual or via video, votes have to be done via roll call. So when we do vote later tonight, that will be done via roll call for that purpose. We have four agenda items tonight, 3 for discussion and 1 for action. And the first item is the Dyna virtual pathway. And Dr. Stanley, if you would like to introduce this item up for discussion, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So, we have a dynamic team that is working on the Dyna virtual pathway. Of course, we know that we've had a Dyna virtual pathway K-5, and we're looking to expand that. And so Jody and her team are coming to share with us updates, really important updates on our progress.
Yes, we just need this one.
I'll figure it out.
That's a good person to have there with you.
I was thinking that, I'm like, I haven't
Let's
done this
see.
before, but I have to have people around me. Don't I? Well, good evening, Dr. Stanley, Chair Allenberg, fellow board members, colleagues, and community members. We're excited to be here tonight to give an update on the Dyna virtual pathway. I'm going to introduce this fabulous team that's with me, give a quick overview, and then we'll jump into the presentation. I have Mike Petoskey here, who is a Dyna High School assistant principal who is engaged heavily in the virtual pathway component of the high school in collaboration and partnership with Sean Beaverson and Mike Walker, both digital and personalized learning specialists. And Sean has had the role of assistant principal at our Edina Elementary virtual pathway this year as well. So last spring, which seems like 20 years ago, we did bring the Dyna virtual pathway to the board and got approval to move forward with development of the program. As Dr. Stanley mentioned, we have had a really successful and positive experience with our elementary programming this year. And we've been diving deeply into developing what that would and could look like for our entire district K-12 programming. We are going to begin the presentation with a highlight and overview of some things that you've asked for in the past, just a real deep connection to what our Edina brand is and our Edina vision and mission. Then we'll move into elementary programming, highlight what's gone well this year and what we're looking towards into the future, and then move to the secondary components. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean to kick us off with the beginning of the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to the public. Chair Allenberg, Superintendent Dr. Stanley, and everybody else who I'm meeting for the first time. I am pleased to provide an update. The first part of the update, we respond to a couple questions that we were asked the last time we presented to the board. And one of the questions that we were asked when we were presented to the board is how will we maintain the Edina brand as we look to expand our brand across the state and consider inviting students from all over the state of Minnesota to apply. And so we looked at what our core values are, and we tied this directly back to our core values, because if we can tie it back to our core values, then it will maintain our brand. So in the area of academic excellence, we believe that we are confident that our online program will continue to be a Minnesota State aligned program. It will include modern and innovative curricula and include academic advisory and coaching built in for students to monitor and support their academic excellence. As a matter of equity, we are literally meeting students where they are in many cases, which can empower the families. We have a safe and sustained online environment. We have a variety of ways that we protect students while we're working online and help them be prepared. And then identify and remove artificial barriers for those that would otherwise benefit from a virtual setting. So artificial barriers are for those students who would benefit from virtual but have some barrier that requires them to come in person. So it sort of flips that model that we have where some students who are required to be remote because they're unable to come into the school. There are some students who the opposite is true for as well. And so we seek to eliminate those barriers so that they can benefit from the proper setting for their learning. Family, school, and community collaboration. Caregivers and teachers partner in unique ways. We are literally some of the most consistent feedback that we hear from parents and from the teachers is the unique connection and relationships that they make because of the way that the programming works. We are connected to our neighborhood schools and learn from our neighborhood schools and stay connected in that way. And then community partnerships are made more interesting and eased in a virtual pathway. So we've had a variety of guests come into our school in the past year that typically would not have that ability to come into our school because of mobility. So because they can join virtually, there's some advantages there as well. Life skills, agency and independence by design. So one of the questions that will be considered is how do we differentiate between an in-person program and what are the advantages to actually doing an online or virtual program? And one of those advantages is targeting directly the independence of the student and developing their agency. It is required for their success in the program. And so building that in at the beginning, they have a different experience with that. And just quickly, just was walking out this morning, and my daughter, who experienced obviously pandemic learning, she was frying her own egg this morning at the age of 13. And what I've been able to reflect on and recognize is, I don't think she would have done that had she not had that time at home and developed those independent skills at a quicker pace than she would have otherwise. And so it's not a remarkable thing, but it's also kind of a remarkable thing. And so considering that and ways that we can have that be a part of our program. Dedicated time for social and emotional development. Another one of our teachers shared some thoughts, and she had a couple of just key thoughts. One was virtual provides a front row seat for every child. So every child gets a front row seat in a virtual setting. They're all equally placed on the screen to be able to see. And then the other part is the ease with which she can move them into individualized experiences. So one of the questions about how do we make sure that students are being successful? How do we help students? How do you do that in what would normally in a brick and mortar setting, they would go to see another teacher or they might move to another space. This is more seamless according to the families that are experiencing it and the teachers and the students because they just go to a breakout room. And so without there being some major acknowledgement about moving settings to get different support, kids just appear where they need the support. And so again, designing that into this program as well. Operational excellence, something that we'll talk about is maintaining neutral cost or ideally bringing in revenue into the district ultimately. Meeting the technical needs of each situation. So considering what do kids need or families need to be connected, what are the tools that they need, and how will we make sure that that is sustainable long-term so we don't have fits and starts around technology or those types of technical supports. And then looking at our sustainable staffing model so that when we hire teachers to teach online because they want to teach online, that we're going to invest in their ability to do that, and then that will be the place that they get to teach. And so that's our operational excellence. Professional excellence, quality Edina teachers. One of the advantages of this program is that we're able to offer our teachers to kids around the state of Minnesota, which is of course a huge advantage. Deep and sustained professional development. We acknowledge and believe in that online teaching is different than teaching in person, and that it can't just be adjacent to teaching in person, that it needs to be substantively different and unique in the way that it happens online. There's a lot of research about online learning and how online happens, which is not what was happening during the pandemic in our emergency response. So considering how we can sustain that professional development. And then it gives us an opportunity to recruit new teachers. And so we have had 3 teachers that were hired this year to support the elementary virtual program, and they are phenomenal. They are teachers that I look forward to keeping in the Edina Public Schools for the remainder of their career, regardless of setting, because they are that good. And so this provides for us an opportunity to go out and attract talent to our district as well. And then finally, the healthy learning environments. Having balance included in this purposefully, acknowledging that screen time and breaks from screen are important to build in, and the schedule that the teachers develop attend to that. And then right fit learning environments. So again, that idea of the Google Meet and the breakout and the intimacy that's available, we're able to create these right fit learning environments for the students in a way that is more seamless than what happens in person when kids may just have to go to a specials for a period of time. This is something that can be done even more seamlessly. And then safe and secure. Again, our technical background to make sure that all of our students' information is safe and secure. The program description, an online experience that utilizes the excellence of Edina staff and curriculum. It's fully standard aligned. It's a pathway that's a future creator and an incubator of innovation. So we'd seek also, if we're going to add this avenue to our district, to how this avenue can inform our district largely as well. And so ways that things that we learn and innovations made possible because of virtual, how do they fit in our online, and how can that inform our in-person programs as well. There's the descriptions, continuous progress program for K-5 or multi-aged is more appropriate. It's a multi-age program. Middle school, interdisciplinary, so the middle school teachers are beginning this work and looking at how interdisciplinary can work to support this in high school. Future-ready competencies, or students will leave our care ready for the future that they hope to create. In the bottom of that slide, there are currently 61 state-approved online providers. So as we get into the next part, which is the why, 61 online providers that are competing for Dyna students now, that we are trying to make sure that we can retain and keep. But in addition to that, speaking with Jeff Plowman at the state, there's 30 other applications in process this year. And so after this year, the potential is that the program is going to increase by a third. So a portion of it is just making sure that kids have access to the excellence that is the Dyna, and then making sure that we remain relevant with our public school partners across the state of Minnesota. So why virtual? I just mentioned it's an opportunity for Edina to again define excellence. There's a long history of virtual programs in the state of Minnesota. They've been around for a little over 20 years. We are part of that second wave, which is the group that learned through the pandemic that this is a viable option for students, that some students do thrive in this setting, and that there is a pent-up interest and desire for it. We're a part of that group that can help define the way that that looks. It is not well defined yet across the K-12 system. This is our opportunity to help define what that looks like. Retain and draw students. So as I mentioned, this is a way for us to retain our students who may look for other opportunities outside of our district, and then to draw students from outside of the district. And so there's a lot of discussion about the types of students that work well in an online program. And what I would suggest is we don't know all of them yet, but some that we can think of are athletes who maybe excelled beyond the varsity league now and they're doing juniors. My brother was a juniors hockey player, so he didn't play varsity. He went to Green Bay because he couldn't stay in the state of Minnesota. So maybe we could keep my brother in the state of Minnesota and doing school. The entrepreneurs, we have kids who right now have started online businesses and online shops that require a ton of their attention. Dyna has a history of some of those kids who have done that. This provides for them a flexibility in the way that they approach school that will allow them to continue to develop that entrepreneurial spirit while also attending to their high school education. And then all of the students in between that may be benefited by a virtual pathway. When we add an option, we expand availability for students that we can draw into that program. Innovate and elevate, like I mentioned before, this is, if we're increasing by a third next year in the state of Minnesota, this is a way of school that has been exposed largely to people over the past 2 years. This is not what we are seeking to build, an emergency response online version. We're seeking to build something significantly more substantial than that, which will require us to innovate and think differently about the way that we provide learning experiences for students of all types across the state of Minnesota. to solve those problems will require innovation, right? And then all means all. There's a group of students who historically have struggled in school. They have a variety of reasons why going to school has been difficult for them. I can connect this again personally. Before the pandemic, my own daughter was experiencing a lot of anxiety going into junior high school. She had a stomach issue that we just couldn't nail down. We didn't know what the problem was. And the battle to get her into school was formidable, and it was heartbreaking. This provides an option for us to be able to address those problems for some students. We have a student joining us starting just after spring break who specifically is seeking us because we will ease the anxiousness of that child, and they are at the point where they want to continue learning, connect to a community, but getting into school right now is just too much for the young child to have to deal with. And so here's an opportunity for us to provide another option for those families. And then the quick overview of our elementary approach and where we're at. So the programming features in our elementary approach, we use the multi-age setting this year. We have 5 sections, STEAM aligned. So as we develop as a district in our STEAM alignment, this would be included in our online program. Proficiency based, and so our 3, 4, 5 teachers are working together now to think about how these kids can be grouped differently based on proficiencies. And then whole child focus. And again, I would go back to that initial comment, which was every child gets a front seat in the class. The way that teachers, the pairs that support these kids, and the kids get to know each other is different. And it isn't necessarily better, but it's different. And so I think that has some advantages in our elementary program. We have 5-year sections this year. We would look to grow to 7 sections next year. And then we have a goal to get to 10 sections by the following year, which would be 2 sections at each grade level, which would give us enough momentum or the size of a program to really be able to think about differently about how that operates. And it gives us time to grow into that and to learn about the ways to do that. That's the elementary program. I do want to acknowledge that the elementary program this year, again, when we started in August, I know we've said this a number of times, was 2 sections. And then within 7 days, it became 5 sections. So while we've had a lot of success this year's program is still an emergency health response program. We've done a wonderful job pulling this together to meet the needs of families who would have otherwise left us to go to other districts who had online options. But we acknowledge that this program needs to grow beyond its emergency response program, which it still was this year. We grew rapidly. There are areas of improvement that we are attending to and would seek to make sure to address going forward. Just access to art teachers, for example, has been more asynchronous than we would like at the elementary program. So we'd like to improve that element of it. Mike, do you want to talk about?
Yeah, and so right now, you can kind of see on this overview slide, and then we'll get into more detail a little bit later, some of the program features we're looking at for middle level. We have met now a couple times with a team of middle level teachers, kind of doing a SWOT analysis, seeing what type of interest is there, as well as what the possibilities are, strengths and opportunities through that, and also the threats and things like that. You see some enrollment goals here for the coming years if we were to move into a middle level program, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then Mike, do you want to share a little bit what we're looking at for high school?
Yeah, so to piggyback off of what Sean was just saying, the high school program right now is still kind of a crisis response program. We have a number of courses. There's a slide coming up which will show the number of sections that we have currently running online. And we've been meeting with those teachers to talk about how that has been going and what they've learned from that experience. Because it's not a hybrid, it's not a distance, it's actually, you know, they've elected to go forward and they have the enrollment to run an online course. And generally it's been going very well, but I do want to stress that at the high school, we are still in the learning and questioning mode about how to build this fully out. And staff are in different places. Teachers are in different places when it comes to this. And so we have some staff who are very, very comfortable. Some teachers a little less, want to continue to learn about the online platforms that are out there and how to master online pedagogy, and they're getting there, and we're working there. So we are a little bit at the beginning stages of that. And I'll talk a little bit more, but about Sean and Mike and I have been meeting with each department because the needs of each department are a little different. We just met today with world language. The needs and concerns of the world language teachers are very different than science, which is very different from fine arts. And so we've been going through kind of methodically meeting with each department, doing the SWOT analysis, talking about kind of a needs assessment rather, of what we need to do, and looking at things specifically about like how our science labs done really well out there. We have some ways that our science teachers are doing them right now. They're not always perfect, and I think there's curiosity for how else that is happening. You know, we spoke with world language teachers today, and our world language program is based on a proficiency basis, and the proficiency is centered around interpersonal communication. And so doing a virtual world language class presents some challenges. And so I think that the world language department they want to see how it's done really well, because it's difficult to master a language if you're not interacting in person with somebody or through Google Meet. And some really great things were done during distance learning. And so some of that groundwork is laid, but there are just a lot of questions right now. So I don't know if I actually took us through these numbers, but
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder, the elementary update, the current enrollment, we've retained 91 students. We had 103 enroll at the beginning of the year. We're at 91. We've had some students return to the neighborhood school, and we've gained some students this year as well from other districts. 61 students are Dyna residents and 30 are open enrolled. And then next year's number as they stand right now, including families that are currently enrolled, we are at 52 families that have committed for an online program for next year. And that is reasonable. So the group of families that the drop is by those families who are using this year as a safety, but that we have retained 52 with at the beginning of this, I think, is a strong sign that we're on the right track for elementary. You can look at the word cloud there to see some of the highlights. I asked some families if they would be willing to share some quotes. And so this mother, who's a mother of a kindergartner, she just shared her daughter would not have learned as well as she did this year. She has lots of pain because of her disease. This gave her a chance to manage that pain and hopefully have more options for her to interact with other kids next year. She was able to be connected to kids in a way that the family was concerned she wasn't going to be able to. The flexible schedule is very popular. And then our teachers have done a really remarkable job of maintaining a regular and reliable schedule. So that was something that we have learned from this year as well. And then just from one of the teachers talking about her ability this year, this was a teacher who accepted the position because it was Edina Public Schools, and then found success in teaching online. And what she has found is her ability to create those connections and relationships with the kids and the families has been meaningful for her. The middle school's comprehensive program development, so we just talked about this. We've met with the middle school teams. We asked them to do a SWOT analysis. I'm just using this as a visual. When you talk to the middle school teams, you can see they skew to the left, which are the strengths and opportunities. So as they're beginning to imagine how this might look, that group of teachers is skewing to the left, imagining the strengths and opportunities that are available while also acknowledging some weaknesses to the approach and some strengths, things that we need to address and deal with if we're going to move forward. It's good to have this information to help us pave the road. And the high school supplemental.
Yeah, so this is the slide I referenced earlier. These are the courses that are currently running. And so if you look, we're running sections of health. We have a couple of sections of a full year of Algebra 2, some personal wellness, blended guided fitness. Then we're running US history, one section of econ, and then some summer offerings for a total of 571 current semester enrollments that are or will be running this summer. And so, the desire is out there, and the students, and we've had additional enrollment interest for this coming year. The students are there, and when you talk about running sections through our MOU agreement, where we could run smaller sections. There are students to run those sections, but we're very optimistic that with the ability to advertise more, we would be able to draw in students from around the metro and potentially from around the state with the brand of excellence that Edina offers. And so, here are the sections that were offered. We've had, in general, students who are taking the online experience are having a very positive experience. And a big one that was mentioned earlier is, the flexibility, as well as, being able to do school, do a class, and not necessarily have to be physically in the classroom. For some students is kind of a relief, because our classrooms are large, the high school is large. There is that desire on the part of some students to be able to not only have that flexibility, but be able to do school from outside of the brick and mortar building. Mike, do you want to talk about student feedback?
Yeah, so on this slide, we kind of have some notes from students talking, as Mike said, about the flexibility piece. Having choice and their time management was something that was beneficial to the students. And then parents talking about, that example of the daughter with some social anxiety, where being outside the classroom in that online environment, she didn't have to necessarily deal with some of those things in the building, and was able to focus on her learning. And then the Wordle there is actually from the parents who have expressed interest in a secondary online experience for their students for this coming year. And so again, the key components that they're interested in of being flexible, but also having some rigor and honors type courses associated with it, and then also some structure. So kids parents of middle school students may want to see a little bit more structure in what the day looks like, whereas high school students, as that gradual release of responsibility, a little bit more flexibility in that.
And there are some questions, there are quite a few questions out there that we're still working as departments and staff on developing some practices and procedures around. And it might not be blanket across all of the departments, but some of the questions are, can we talk about ratio of synchronous to asynchronous time? And that might be different from world language than it would be for social studies. And so, we're going to continue to work with teachers. We have some preliminary feedback that we're going to take into spring break and spend a little time combing through. And then we'd like to do another couple of rounds of meetings with the departments to go forward and with that feedback and start to answer some of those questions. And some of those questions might be answered as we move through the process of offering these courses. And how did they feel the first time? One of the things that we've said in each of these department meetings is that what we're offering right now and the product we're offering next year is not the product that we're going to be offering 5 years from now when we've learned a lot from experience. And so we will continue to grow and we'll continue to improve. And we have teachers that are active learners with this stuff. And so the teachers that will step forward to offer these courses, I think will be teachers that are going to dive into this. What I've learned about Edina teachers is that they give themselves fully, right? Once they commit, they give themselves fully. And we have some teachers that are already there, and some teachers that just have some questions. So
as we look to the fall, if we were able to get enough students from outside the district to pay for some things, we would see what we might be looking at. Go back one more, sorry.
Okay.
That some of our course offerings, to offer a comprehensive, they may be online classes that an Edina teacher is teaching within their schedule. It may be a course that didn't quite meet the threshold for a full FTE, but teachers have agreed to teach through the MOU. Or we may look to outside providers for some classes to make sure that a student's schedule is fully filled out and they're continuing to meet their progress toward graduation. So that's kind of what the thinking is. And then as we move forward beyond next year, that it would be a separate program fully staffed by a team, full FTE in Edina. And then, as I mentioned, the MOU that the district and EME has agreed to, that if a class doesn't meet the threshold of 21, a teacher may choose to do that outside their school day. So it would be more of an asynchronous course but teachers could teach that on a per student basis and be paid by semester. And so as we're looking at that, we're looking at the number of students that would be necessary in order to pay for the number of seats in that MOU course. I see that taken out there, that number. I think it's around 16 and a half seats per MOU student.
We've done 2 rounds of advertising so far through social media, and so here's an example of some of our social media ads, and we've generated about 60 responses now to our interest form based on that, and so we are generating some interest with our initial offerings. We just did a little video shoot with one of the virtual teachers, and so we've got some more detailed advertisements coming. We actually get to meet the people who are doing the teaching and the planning, and so those are on the horizon as well. One of the things that, this is our outreach, so 96,713 people have seen the ad. I just learned stuff about social media marketing when I learned all this. It's probably not as interesting to everybody as it was to me, but this was kind of curious. We can target it to the metro area, we can target to the whole state. So we've 1,300 people have clicked through, and 1,200 people went to our website then. So nothing else, we're generating clicks to our website to have people learn about Edina Public Schools.
And so based on the what we're seeing right now in the numbers for people who have signed up, you can kind of see how many interest based on grade level and based on whether it's starting to trend more 60-40 as far as outside the district versus inside the district. But again, anyone inside the district who is retained in an online program is a student that is not leaving the district to find an online program somewhere else. So that's one of the things. And one of the things that we saw in some of our research is that right now, like for this semester, we have over 300 of our Edina high school students taking a class through Northern Star Online. And potentially we could recoup some of those students taking those courses in the Dyna online class and save on revenue that way as well. And so as we look at middle school, we've tried to put together some numbers to see how many students we would need from outside the district coming in to pay for a fully FTE program for our middle school, and we're looking at around 116 students estimated for that to work out. And then for the high school, because of some flexibility and how the sections versus full year classes and stuff, we're looking at about 91 students from outside Edina would be needed to offer, 48 classes, which would be more bare bones. It wouldn't necessarily have as many of the electives, but it gives you an idea. And anything that was an MOU course for next year could potentially make that number come down because it wouldn't be as costly as a full FTE course.
All that work is to share that one of the things that we need to know is that we need to have a sustainable and a strong foundation. So we've done a lot of work in setting the foundation to be able to invite our teachers in to begin the planning and development of what this looks like fully, right? And so another key feature, I think, of our development is we are inviting teachers in to help us do this. We have learned from our neighborhoods, districts around us, what they're doing. There is research around what this, how this can work, but really what's going to make it a meaningful and an Edina-based program is our teachers. And so we've really done a lot of work initially, particularly at the secondary level, to be able to answer how many students do we need to make this viable, so that our teachers, when they're spending the time planning, they know that they're spending the time and planning for something that's going to run. And so I would say that that's a key part of the work that we've done so far, is as good as we can, wherever possible, to add clarity and focus on things that are difficult to get clarity and focus on. So that's our update.
And we will be having parent meetings for the secondary program on Wednesday evening and elementary program on Thursday evening.
Well, thank you. Can you click over so we can see Karen really fast?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Okay. So just before we start with board comments and questions, we don't have any sort of decision to be made. It's just an open discussion with more questions or clarifications or comments that you have for this team. So I'll just open it up for you guys to.
Well, I have a few. Go ahead if you want to start. Well, so you mentioned that there are already 61 state-approved online providers, and there's 30 more that are applying for it, as Edina is. Whenever I think about online virtual programming, are there standards associated with what makes an excellent online program, and there's a map for that? You're kind of building your scaffolding based off of that? Is there an accreditation process that's appropriate for the state of Minnesota related to that? And if so, what are we doing about that? That's one question, and I have a couple financial questions to ask after that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Minnesota does have a number of statutes outlined that describe what the program needs to be, and then we go through an application process. And so we've submitted applications to the state of Minnesota, and then those are reviewed, and then we're approved by the state. So first we get accreditation through the state of Minnesota to be able to provide this. And then as far as roadmaps to what makes great online experiences, I would say at the secondary level, there's a lot more clarity in that because there's a longer tradition of that. And so we'll look to that to help give us examples on how we can build, but always with that eye of how will we make it special and unique to our experience. At the elementary level, there's less. It has a shorter pathway to experience in that, right? Like, so one of the things that we did just a few weeks ago, because of that very nature, because of the difficulty of that, we partnered with a number of districts, and I can't remember, there was 126 people there to come together across the state to try to learn from each other's experiences about what's working well. As we think about teaching the kids online, what do we need to know? What are you experiencing that's working? What isn't working? And we'll continue to bring that group of current teachers who really are pioneers at the elementary level together to inform us. And so that's how we address that. Michigan State has an online program that the state provides. They've got a lot of resources that we've looked at as well. There's national and international organizations that have standards set for how you do this as well. And so there's a lot of information about how to make that scaffolding as rigorous as possible. What goes into it, we get to decide and we get to fill with our teachers. So that's the model that we're looking at.
So if I were to say that in a different way, that we're not recreating the entire wheel. There is an axle and a mechanism and so on and so forth, and then we're deciding what we want that wheel to do.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think
Excellent.
that's a great way to
Thank you. Second question is, forgive me for dumbing it down, at each level, both at the primary level and the secondary level, is this meant to be a program that literally takes someone all the way through to completion of their requirements? So in the secondary in particular, right, graduating from secondary high school,
Right.
you could do this all virtually. That's the goal that we're talking about.
That's the goal.
Exactly, right. And
Well,
so,
that's not going to be the initial thing at the beginning, or is that where, if you're starting that next year, that you'd be on that path?
so part of as Sean alluded to, there's an application process with the state. And with that application process, in order to be approved as a comprehensive program, you have to offer an opportunity, all of the courses necessary for a student to graduate from school with all of the standards and course requirements that the district requires. So that would be part of it.
Yeah, and to your second question, anyone who joins us, those families that are currently, those 53 families that are currently enrolled this year that seek to continue next year, we're building a program where they will be able to use that program for the rest of their career. So if you join us next fall in an online program, the reason why we're looking at the sustainability, the break-even point, what we need to do is if we invite you in next fall, we anticipate it's because you want an online experience and we're going to graduate you. If you come in as a kindergartner, you're going to have a great experience, and 13 years later, you're going to graduate. If you come in as a sixth grader and we're just beginning to develop what that middle level program looks like, we'll have enough confidence of what that program looks like in the fall that we anticipate you'll spend 6 years with us and graduate in 6 years. So yes, next fall, what we are, and when we're moving incrementally, it's only because we're unclear yet of how many students we'll attract. As we get to advertise and share more details about what our program is, when we reach that break-even point, that's the thing that really determines the speed at which this expands. But I would say, as we say we are a Dyna virtual pathway next fall, a K-12 program, we would anticipate that someone would join our program and have the ability to graduate from our program.
Excellent, thank you. And then my last question is, assuming the accreditation is in order to move forward, you have to have the accreditation, then I'm assuming from a financial standpoint, then the actual remuneration to the district related to that student enrolling in the virtual pathway, either it falls the same as it would be in the bricks and mortar, is not a separate funding mechanism related to
Right.
virtual
It's
pathway.
exactly the same.
That's right.
Excellent.
That's
I
right.
figured all those were the way, but I wanted to make sure I could.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. You know, the question I had was a little bit related to Michael's second question about the K through 12 and being able to graduate. All the programs have to be offered by Edina, or can you supplement them with like a PSEO or a Northern Star in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just like our brick and mortar allow for supplementing some of those things, PSEO or Northern Star, it would be the same for the online program. So
And that may be part of the transition process to the full comprehensive anyway. You know, next year we may have enough enrollment to run a lot of courses,
Right.
but there may be some that we might not be there, in which case we'll have to partner with an outside.
And that counts to allow us
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And then that was that feeds into my second question about like summer programming. Do any of the other 61 schools that currently do it, do they, some families obviously aren't going to be comfortable right off the bat saying, my kid I think will be good at this, but I don't necessarily know if they will. Is there a way to like, do other schools use it like a dip your toe in and offer summer programming so that they can do it? And would we ever do that to be like a feeder program and do our other?
That's a really great question, and I don't know the answer to it, but it's a fantastic idea, and so yes, we'll do that. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I do know that online summer programming is offered online, and that's a common way to offer summer programming. But in the way that you describe it, I think I don't know how consistent that is or how regular that is, but it sounds like an opportunity for one of those innovations. Come and explore and experience this online class over the summer, and if you like it, come do the rest
and
of
we
this.
do offer currently online health and online PE through Dyna, and students take that during the summer. But as Sean said, having some additional offerings, potentially offering some classes where students can progress a little bit faster in science or math.
Yeah, well, and I think the use
would
case
be something
with my family when they did the summer online wellness piece was to free up their schedule so they could take other courses that they couldn't get. So, I mean, that's secondary
That's pretty
focus,
common.
right? Yeah.
and that's why you do see a lot of the PE or health
Right.
options over the summer.
Thanks.
Julie, Janie, or Karen?
I can go.
Okay.
I have a bunch of questions. So this is the first time I'm seeing a lot of this. I'm not on teaching and learning or any of that. So just want to apologize ahead of time.
It's all right.
So I want to take us up 30,000 miles high on this because I understand the benefits. I have confidence in our district and the teachers. There's a market clearly for it. I have no doubt that Edina would be able to deliver the academics in this. We've seen it in the elementary, and I know that things evolve, and I trust that innovation in doing that. I also think it's an incredible pathway that's viable for students. My question is, when I look at the numbers and I look at the goal, is our goal as a district to have enrollment at 10,000? Because that's what we'd be looking at in a couple of years, right? And that gives me a moment to pause because I want to make sure that in doing so, we are having the supports across the board. Administration, student support, all those wraparound services, right? The academic piece, it's fantastic. This is super exciting. I think a lot of kids would lean into it. I'm worried about, and I'm concerned about all the other parts of the district that this would push on resources. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that, but when I look at our strategic plan, this wasn't part of it, right? But also the pandemic wasn't part of it either. So I understand that, and I know it's important to pivot. I know that as a board, we will be evaluating the plan, and I know we talk about that a lot. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that.
I can jump in just quick for the
Yeah,
high
go
school.
ahead.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because we had, we're meeting with all the departments, and one of the departments is our student services, be counselors and social workers. And that was the question. When we start adding students, are we adding them to the current counselor load and social work load, or do we need to relook at that? And I think there's going to be a little bit of a transition point before we have the critical mass of students where we start, and we have an administrator, we have a counselor that is specifically, or two counselors that are specifically K-12 virtual pathway, and then also social worker. And I think that is an area that we want to continue to explore because we can certainly provide a lot of virtual services, mental health support, telemental health support. We're doing that already at Edina, but would we, these are questions that we're asking within the department as well. There's something called multi-tiered student support services, and we have to rethink about that when it comes to providing support for students who are online. An example might be, we might have, I feel like I'm not answering questions, I'm giving you more questions, but these are the,
No,
I want to fill you in with the conversations that we're having, that we're moving in the direction of answering. If we have a student that is only taking one course through us and they're struggling in that course, the question that we're talking about right now is, where does the support for that student in that course lie? Does that lie with our, obviously with our teacher, but with our counselor, or because that student is dual enrolled and then they also be taking 4 courses in Richfield. They also have counsel and a social worker there. And so we are having that conversation. Once the student becomes a fully online Edina high school student from wherever they are in the state, the responsibility falls on our shoulders to be able to provide also all those supports. And so we're already talking about workload delegation and what that would look like in student services. And we may have counselors that actually take on our online students solely and not worry as much about alpha, but these counselors are just going to take the online students until we get to a point where we have enough students that the structure supports the bringing on of a fully online counselor. And I think I would anticipate that these are specifically skilled people who are able to make those connections virtually. And then it becomes conversations around how do we structure the delivery of that support throughout the online week, right? Because we don't want, the goal is not to have a student somewhere in Minnesota sitting at a computer all week long and not having any human interaction, right? And so we have to, not only do we have to look at the academic piece of this, but there also has to be a strong social component. And there are programs out there that have done a nice job at that. And so I hope that kind of answers your question. We're moving in that direction, having those conversations.
The other piece to know in the budgetary figuring, we are trying to look at not just the academic cost, but the cost for administration, special services support, parents counseling, et cetera. So that's why the number may seem higher to how many we need in order to pay for a fully online program. But those numbers are being looked at in regards to it. We're using some of the numbers that we're spending this year in our virtual pathway to kind of have a similar ratio as we look at the other 2 programs that we have that built in. So yes.
Okay, that's helpful to know that you guys are having those conversations. I think, and this goes to another question that I had that kind of backs that up, is so if we have 1,000 students or 900 students at the high school, 9 through 12, that are online, what does that do to impact our sports teams, our robotics team? We are extraordinarily competitive already with limited spots for students. Can we support that? And what does that look like? And does the state have any statute that's lining up with that, with kids coming in, and if they're taking one class, are they then eligible to pop onto the baseball team or whatever team? Those are the things that, to me, like those, I mean, we have kids come out of our school system doing extraordinarily well, and it's academic, but it's all the other stuff that goes on and all the other opportunities. And I would not want a student online not to have those opportunities. We just got to make sure, is that what we want to do? I'm not quite there yet, to be honest, because I'm trying to figure out from a strategic standpoint, is this where, is this the best for all the kids? And I would consider someone who's from Duluth online, our student, the same way as someone who's in the classroom. So in order to do that, those are a lot of questions that are bouncing around my head and what that looks like. So you guys don't have to answer that right now, but that's one of the things, so.
I'll just offer that we have started to explore the eligibility requirements and where that might be in. So it's another avenue that is currently being explored and considered, like how would we, and then again, the opportunity here is to create new social opportunities that are unique to a virtual setting. And so it is part of the discussion now as well. And so we do have some questions from Troy specifically about eligibility and what that might look like. Only as an example of, yes, that is an essential part of the education experience of kids, and we wouldn't leave it behind while planning for an academic experience for the kids.
Right, great. Okay, and then my other question is about the movement between online and brick and mortar. And I know that is another thing that I've heard a little bit of you guys talk about, but I would love to learn a little bit more about what your thoughts are, that if we have students that are enrolled online, let's say halfway through the year, can they pop into the high school and be in person, or middle school, and what that looks like and the impact that has on our classrooms? So I don't know some of the other 61 schools that do this, if they have that same challenge or not, or if you guys have done research on that, but that would be data that I would be interested in learning on what that looks like, what those pathways are.
I think the answer to that question depends on the level you're talking. It might be a different answer for elementary, I don't know, than it would be for the high school. So it would, if a student is fully online and they have the capacity to actually come into the building site, like in other words, they're local, right? So they can get to the school. I think the answer is yes, provided that there are space in the classrooms. It's a realistic answer. So we would look at their schedule, and this is just guesswork because this is how I would envision it working out. We would say, okay, second semester you're enrolled in these courses. These courses have spots available. This elective course, they're all full. We might have to look at a different elective course, but we should be able to bring you in. It is, I don't know that we could make 100% guarantee. If you register for a fully online year, to be completely candid, I don't know that we can make 100% guarantee that there would be spaces in all of the classes. I think there's a likelihood, but we would have to take that on a case-by-case basis looking at their schedule.
And so the way that I would address that too is to just, there needs to be a process, right? And so if we, and just like anything else,
And
so.
we've done that this year.
Yeah, so if
We've
it's,
navigated that
right,
really
and so,
consciously.
if a student is struggling in an online setting, and we've been limited this year because of the health requirements, right? Like people are with us because of health concerns. And so we've had less availability to be able to guide someone back to in-person because they do better in person. However, we still have worked down that way and what the steps would be and what's the first contact point, what's the second contact point, what's the student support team that's behind it. And so what we seek to do now is to develop those processes so that when a student struggling for whatever reason, how do we meet where that student is, and then what are all of the options that we can provide to that student? One may be to return back to in person. The other end of it that we would seek to guard against is if you want an a la carte experience where I'm going to have online for this part of the year because it fits good for me, but not this part of the year. So again, we go to process to be able to avoid that a la carte experience, but those are things that need to be considered and developed too. And what we've been real greedy about is just every time we come into one of those experiences, ensuring that there is a process document that explains the steps in order to make sure that it isn't reliant upon an individual's experience. Oh, I knew that kid, so it was easier for me to help that kid out. Nope, that kid's struggling. In what ways are they struggling? How do we know that they're struggling? And then who are the people that will support them? Those supports put into place, then those people make an opinion or an informed decision, and then we reach with the families too, right? And so the method to address it is process. Of those school districts that have been in this before, yes, they do have processes that we can copy and learn from, but then we can change to be specific for Edina as well.
Okay. That is, that's helpful. I'll let someone else ask.
I can go.
Another question.
So my question, it is somewhat tactical. It kind of piggybacks off of Julie's capacity concerns. One of the things that struck me when you presented to teaching and learning was the phrase that you use, reliable and predictable. Like I really leaned into that I see this as being a reliable and predictable option. When I flip it in my head to say, we also want to make sure that our in-person students have a reliable and predictable experience, I started kind of looking at what was explained here, and maybe I'm not reading it correctly, with the MOU, especially at the high school, for our teachers. Is there a possibility that teacher prep time, teacher office hours, teacher flexes would be impacted, say if a teacher decided to take on an online course? And it wasn't a full 21 students, say 16 students signed up. Are we impacting the time that that teacher would have for the in-person students? That's a concern of mine. Specifically, I'm thinking middle and high school, right? The secondary, when those opportunities for our existing students or the students who are in person. Sorry, I know I sound like Cindy Brady, but
Did you say Cindy Brady?
Cindy Brady, yes, she's my okay. I'm just worried that we would be not protecting what is reliable and predictable for our students in the classroom. So I don't know if I was reading that correctly. I don't even know if that's something that is worth answering right now versus saying, as Julie said, it's a concern that I have moving forward. So that was.
That is also a concern that has come up in our department meetings.
Okay.
Because our teachers they have a lot
Mm-hmm.
on the plate. They're busy people, and they're pushing themselves hard, and they want their students to be successful, and
Right.
they'll do virtually anything to make that happen. And they also have a finite number of hours in their week. And so if a teacher takes on the MOU, for example, version of their class, and so maybe they have 12 students, the obligations don't end to their brick and mortar classes. Then it's working creatively within their schedule to find time to connect with those students. But the other thing is, if I'm an Algebra 2 teacher, and I'm teaching a face-to-face Algebra 2, and I'm teaching a virtual Algebra 2, they're not the same class to prep for. That's really two separate preps. So it is a considerable amount of extra time because the teacher who's teaching the virtual one is creating a lot of different materials. And really it's instructionally very different. And so that is something that is in the discussion as well, and that's why right now, the way we're stepping forward is that, no one is compelling the teacher to teach an MOU class. They really have to search inside to see if that's something they want to do. And we do have teachers that want to do it. But I think it's going to be dipping toes in the water to see, okay, my colleague did this. This is how they did this. They're building some of the materials. I think I can do this too. And so that's why it doesn't happen in a blink of an eye. There's a lot of building trust and building capacity that happens. And luckily we've done some of that through distance learning. But I would say also a lot of our teachers wouldn't feel comfortable offering just simply what they offer during distance learning in an imperfect situation. If they're going to offer a genuine, for real online course, then they're going to want to do more with it.
Okay. Would it be unrealistic to expect there to be a kind of check and balance put in place for teachers to ensure that they're still offering flex every week? They still have office hours. Like, I don't know. I don't want to say that we would have to have some strong oversight because I trust our teachers, but at the same time, sometimes if things go far enough into a semester, it's hard for students to kind of come back.
One thought that I had was just that the MOU it sunsets after a year, so it really is a process to get us from having some online courses at the high school offered to a virtual pathway. And so it is meant to bridge what is known currently to what we are planning for the future, not as the long-term solution to be able to offer a virtual pathway. Another distinction I think is important to make for the public and for everybody is that Edina High School will likely still continue to offer online options for kids who attend Edina High School in person. The virtual pathway is a separate pathway for kids who would choose to be fully online all the time. The teachers who are going to teach that as we grow into this will be online instructors primarily as well. And so the purpose of the MOU is to get us from what we've experienced and what we've known to getting us over to the other side to where we have online options at Edina High School informed by this work and made better because of it, but then also a virtual pathway option for families who choose to be completely online.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's some good clarity.
An
So thank
additional
you.
piece is conscientious PD and curriculum credit time. So we were just talking today about building that into our budgets and making sure that we're supporting teachers this summer with intentional curriculum writing time and professional development around the work. So we'll honor that work and continue to support it throughout the year as
Okay.
well.
Will you also, excuse me real quick, will you also then, for the teachers who are going to go the virtual pathway, their skill set requirements in order to be in that will then also be critically established? Because those are not the same.
No.
Just like
it's
you
some
say on the
real-
counselor side, it's the
Yes.
same in the teaching environment.
some real pedagogy and- yes.
I mean, it's already happened across the metro area, actually. There are job postings for online positions. They will be posted online positions that people will apply to because they find success in it, they enjoy it, they want to do it in that mode, so.
We have found that with some of our all of our elementary instructors, two in particular did it last year. And we're just really excited about doing it this year.
Yes, and we'll continue forward. Of all of the elementary teachers who are teaching currently, if provided the option next year, they would continue teaching online again next year. And this is a heroic lift year for them. They've been individualized. There's one per section that they've worked with. So they're unique in their particular challenge for this year. They've done it on their own, and they've done it bare bones. We haven't had all of the services in place that we would anticipate having in place. To Julie's question about the wraparound services, frankly, we haven't met all of those challenges this year because of the way that developed as an emergency response. However, we know that. We've done the numbers. We've put the student needs into the budget charts, and so that when we go to a virtual program that is not an emergency response program, we will have attended to ADSIFs. We will have attended to the other FTEs that are required as part of the planning. This year was a response, everybody remembers Delta was the big thing. There was exploded in a need. We met the need the best that we could with the resources that we had available in partnership with Highlands. That is not the long-term vision for this. The long-term vision is an independently operating virtual pathway that has the same level of service for student support at all ends of the spectrum throughout their, wherever they're at, meeting their needs wherever they're at, in all of the variety of ways that we know that we can do that. We have had a number of meetings at this point with student services to talk about the Iep process and what does it mean for a level 3 student. When is it appropriate for a student in special ed to be in an online program? When is it not appropriate? How do we determine whether it's not appropriate? Again, considering developing those processes, so it's not about, well, this kid seems easier to work with online, so it's okay if they stay online, or worse, this kid's a pain in the butt to work with. Can I say that publicly? In this setting, and so we'll move them to online, and so considering how we avoid those things too are all part of this. We have a number of different small groups that are working on to try to imagine these needs and make sure that if students are participating in a Dyna's virtual pathway, they are not getting a bargain program a bargain version of Edina Public Schools, they are getting the full experience that Edina Public Schools has to offer and all of the things that that means, which is of course a challenge, right? But it is the goal that we've set and the one that we're working towards.
I have one last question. When you mentioned the summer programming, I'm curious if we are designated, if there's any change in our designation or accreditation with online, if we could potentially have some tuition-based options for students in the summer at the high school. I know we currently don't have that as an option, and kids are forced to go to
Right, there is one, if a student wants to take the 15th course, then they do pay tuition on it. So if they are taking full loads, but then they want to take the additional summer PE over the summer, because they don't have space in the schedule.
And they're not then forced to take like a student prep that. So you're saying
No.
there would be
There is a
tuition
mechanism,
based.
there is a
tuition, there
mechanism
has to
that
be.
allows for us to
Yes.
charge
Okay.
tuition.
Yeah.
Yep. That's available in Minnesota State statute for us to be able to do that. Have we explored that one yet? No, not yet.
I think there'd be an appetite, that's what I'm saying. As somebody who's written a lot of checks to Northern Star.
Yes.
That's my last question, yep.
Karen, do you wanna go ahead?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to the team that put this together. There's a lot of work. It's evident there's a lot of work that has gone into this presentation, and the talent on this team that put this together is to be commended. I don't know that there's a better team out there to put it together something like this. I have a lot of questions that I probably will need a personal session. So I will boil it down to just kind of some basics. As I've been looking at this, I have 3 categories of questions. One is process, like how we got to this. One is why, and we've talked a little bit about that in teaching and learning, and this team has done a great job of kind of answering some of that. And then the third category is more of those logistics. So I think in terms of the process, kind of one of the conversations I think I would like to have, and this is not for the presenters, probably more for the board, is kind of, I'm a little bit concerned that we are at this point where we are advertising this and we are just having this come to the board. I think there's a conversation where maybe we need to kind of talk about the process of how this progressed. And so that's something kind of that I've been looking at. Just, I know that when I compare this to kind of our Spanish dual immersion programming and how that rolled out versus this rolled out, it was a little different in terms of the process and, showing like where parent demand was and how it would happen and all of that stuff. So I want us to kind of, I want to raise that because it's something that I want us to kind of take back and kind of look at a little bit. The why, I understand the why, and what gets me really excited is I love the idea of us being able to be nimble. And, if one of our students has a medical need, a personal need, we can pivot and we can provide that, because I think pre-pandemic we struggled a little bit with that. And I think now it's exciting to say that we know that we can do that. When we look at this programming, and I get you've done a great job of kind of saying why, but within our current system, how much of a demand is there for this programming? Can we answer that? Like I'm thinking about the Spanish programming. It was, we know because of X, Y, Z that this is a current need that we will be able to fill.
So I think, Karen, some of the numbers throughout the slide are helping inform that. One thing that I think is an important number is of our elementary, that we have 53 families interested right now at the elementary in this for the future, right, for their students. And do you have the breakdown in front of you of numbers, of how many are in
Yeah.
Dyna?
Yeah, so as we look at the total numbers, as I said, on the one chart, it showed where we're about 60-40 Edina parents versus outside. And so I'm seeing you know, for example, at 7th grade, we have 7 outside, 6 inside Edina who are interested. 8th grade is 9 outside, 3 inside. 9th grade is 7 outside, 6 inside. And so it's kind of goes along that similar route. And so, and some of our numbers that we're looking at on the charts that you saw didn't necessarily include the kids who are in 5th grade right now, going into 6th that might be interested in continuing on, as well as 6th graders going into 7th. So hopefully that gives you an idea.
Yeah, I think, you know, like when we've talked to our families that are choosing elsewhere, are we hearing from them by and large that, hey, I want a virtual option and I can't get it here, so I'm having to go elsewhere to get that?
I think that's a great question, and I don't know that I personally haven't worked with enrollment specifically to ask that, but that would be, I think that's a great avenue to learn.
Yeah.
How many? 3?
Because I think, and this has kind of been talked about with some of the other questions, but you know, these students, if we're doing this because of enrollment, if we're doing it because of a financial need, you know, I'm concerned a little bit about our capacity, and you know, no business or organization is successful trying to be all things to all people. And so I just want to make sure that we're very clear about why we're doing this, what our outcome is. Like I said, I love the fact that we can pivot, and I want us to be able to offer that, because no child should have to be, you know, having a family situation happen where they really need to be able to still attend school and they can't. So that is appealing to me. Rolling out an entirely new system makes me a little nervous. And like I said, if there was a team in place, I would put you would be the team that I would want on board for this. I just have a lot of questions that I want us to be able to deliver the excellence that we offer all the way across. And I want our teachers to feel supported in this. I want our administration to feel supported in this. I want our students that are coming into this program to feel supported. I think we all do, right? Of course you want that. But I have a lot of those logistical questions and kind of that why, how we would measure the success of this. And at what point would we say, we can't move forward with this because we haven't hit these benchmarks that show us that this is a viable program. So,
And those are all good questions, and important, Karen, and they're on the forefront of our planning and our collaboration with so many people. The team up here, yes, is incredible. The teachers they're working with are incredible. Our cabinet is incredible. Everyone is working collaboratively around those questions. And so for them to continue to, you know, be brought up in these situations is important, that we're always keeping them in the forefront. It really continues to strike me how much this does align with our strategic plan and our goal of providing pathways for students. This is a unique pathway that, as we see, is not so unique, right? 61 providers already, 30 applications in, and it really benefits a certain type of learner in so many exciting ways. And I love when Sean talks about how the innovation within a program like this could also inform great innovation and development within our brick and mortar schools. Like, there's just so much possibility and innovation in it that's connected to our strategic plan and connected to all the questions that you're asking, that in every step that we take, we have to keep coming back to the why, the purpose, and the structures that we have in place, and the metrics to measure those. So all important questions that we definitely want to be reminded to keep at the forefront, and we will keep at the forefront.
Yeah, and I think because this conversation started I know I was at a meeting and I hadn't started as superintendent yet when this conversation started, May or June or something like that. I can understand why it would feel like the process was done in a hasty manner, but it's certainly been brought to the board. You know, for me as superintendent, I thought that I heard direction that this was something that we were supposed to go forward with. So it's not like it's something that's just new and we're kind of putting it on the table. We have talked about, we presented a couple of times to the board and certainly talked about where we were at with our application status at the middle school, where we were at the high school level. We did lose students, and Greg's not here. We can certainly have him pull those numbers. We did lose students. I heard from several families who were frustrated because we didn't have a secondary option in place, like they had expected that we would have for our Edina children. So, whether it is, I love that language that you used, Sean, I wrote it down. Emergency health response, whether it was for emergency health response or it was for, we figured this out and this is something we want to do because it's flexible and we want to have that opportunity. That is something that we certainly need to look at. To get to the point where we have 900 students in our high school program, I hate to say it, but probably none of us are going to be at this table at that time, because it really does take a long time to build a program up. I mean, it truly does. And I think that they put a ton of time into this. And if I will say for me personally, if this is a direction that we're not going to go, I would prefer to hear it well ahead of time than to continue to have my team invest the time that they're investing into this, and then pull back, because it's a lot of time. I mean, you're hearing everything that they've done so far. So I think it's important for us to have that direction so that we know where we're going.
I think you just said something that I agree that it is, at least in my spot, I was looking at it as an emergency response and know that it could evolve into more, which is what we were exploring. I think what actually threw me off was the enrollment goals on that one slide. I was like a little stunned by that, and not that we shouldn't offer it, but like those numbers add up quickly, and that's only 2 years from now. And so a slow roll out, to me, we would still be here if we hit those goals. And so how aggressive are those goals? And maybe that's part of this conversation, is what is a realistic timeline? And maybe that addresses some of Karen's questions too. Like what is realistic? So that's just my
Are there
thoughts on
benchmarks
that.
though that, obviously emergency response was the last 2 years. I don't think that there's enough to see the multiplier yet in the world we live in today to kind of estimate that piece of it properly.
That's right.
I think we can say that, if we're offering good programs, we're gonna see improvement, but I think it's also gonna kind of come in waves, because I think classes of kids and groups of kids are they group think, and so I think sometimes those are gonna grow. I get where you're at. 10,000 is a scary number in some respects, but in the same instance, I think that as we get better at it, I have faith that we'll get better at it and that we'll be able to manage the people within that role.
So one thing that I would like to see, or an exercise I would like to see, and only if the board wants to see it, because I don't want to, it's only me, I don't want any energy spent on something I only am interested in. I would love to see you guys reverse engineer, because you talked about your one slide about how I'm going to it, but aligning with our values, the Dyna brand. I would love to see you guys reverse engineer what you feel that the brick and mortar model offers from the Dyna brand. And what I'm thinking is, how then do you feel, it was sort of to Julie's point, are there any places that you feel that this model could impact what we sort of stand for from a brick and mortar perspective, which one of those things is a diversity of clubs. It's all of these things that really define us currently as a school district. And maybe part of it is also the number of students. So maybe at 50 students at the high school, it doesn't impact any of this at all. Maybe at 200 students, you're concerned about it impacting athletic program or something like that. And I would love to see sort of how do these two interact with each other, because I think it's great to talk about it here and it looks, I mean, everything is super exciting, but I would love to talk about how they interact with each other, because we're a holistic school district. And then maybe, to me, that also would help define some of these processes that you're talking about and thinking about, which is if we have 50 students that sign up that are hockey stars from outstate and they all want to join the hockey team, what is that a go, no go? Is that acceptable or not acceptable? And so I think it could really have some interesting conversations to help us brainstorm processes behind some of these things that aren't the clear academic piece to it. Does that make sense? So that's something I would be interested in.
Well, could I propose maybe what you're looking for is a little bit more of like a guiding change document type of a analysis that we would, I don't know if that makes sense. Like these are our yeses, these are our no's, this is acceptable, this isn't. And I think that that's the piece that maybe we as a board would need to see moving forward with decisions. I think understanding what realistic enrollment numbers look like the goals are great, like they're exciting goals, but they are scary goals, right? And I think having a better understanding of, are those goals there because we need to have those numbers in order to be the program that we want, or are those goals there because that's what we expect we can get, right? Kind of separating those two pieces. And I think that could also be a part of like a guiding change document. That might be, I don't know if it is reverse engineering because it's going back, right? Because a lot of this was born out of an emergency response. It wasn't born out of the same way that like Spanish dual immersion was born out of. So
And so, yeah, I would imagine a lot of that would be the output of this exercise, which would be one of the things that we consider out of scope would be if it negatively impacts blah, 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 blah. Which that was a great example. I couldn't think of anything. It would be in scope, like we're okay if it's, I mean, I don't know what any of those are, but I would be really interested, and I think we do have to say some of these things, because then that one thing that we're gonna have to look at, which was the other point I was going to make, is that we have to do a thorough review of all of our policies. And how this impacts all of our policies. But I feel like until I sort of know where we stand on a lot of these things and how they interact with each other, it's hard to know. So I don't know if I've given enough direction or said enough, or if I'm confusing everything.
Well, go ahead, Sean. I was gonna add something about Erica's.
I'll just say, I've used the analogy a lot lately of building a teeter-totter at both ends at the same time. And that's what it is. And so we know in order to be viable for next year, we need around 91 students to join. 91 students leaves us at break even. If we never grew beyond that, it would be 91 students that would join into our district, and we would have a small boutique program that would sit at around 100 students. And it could remain like that. It could be that that's the niche that we meet. The goals that we set are, we are imagining that post-pandemic, the increase in people's experience with the flexibility that was required as a response to the pandemic is going to motivate them to seek different ways to do things that we had done traditionally in the past. And so the goals are lofty, but they're set as an independent program that is different than what we experienced previously, and even different than what has been experienced for 20 years in the online space. Those 30 districts that have put in the application this year, knowing a lot of those people, being connected with those people are all going through the exercise of imagining something that is substantively different than what happens in the brick and mortar for those families that would seek to have that experience, that online flexibility for all the variety of reasons that they would do it. And so we're hoping to build a program, or our work is to build a program that would draw students from around the state, that they would say, yeah, I could go to any one of these other online programs, but the Edina program has these offerings, and so I want to attend to that. And then if that is above and beyond our 91 students, then we're beyond our point of sustainability as a program. And then at some point, we've talked about this, at what point does is there a break point where it becomes big enough to be by itself and to sustain by itself? We don't have those numbers yet because we're still continuing to work on that other end of the teeter-totter, because we have to have a program for people to want to join, and the program has to be substantial enough to be describable so that people know what they're going to join, but all the while going back and addressing the other side. The middle part of the fulcrum that is undeniable and unquestionable is what the students will need in order to be successful and have a meaningful experience while participating in an online program, right? And like that is laser focused from the teachers that we talk to. All of the concerns that they're bringing up at this point, all of the opportunities that they're bringing up at this point is all student-centered. How do we make sure that this is meaningful for students? And it's fair, it's tough. It's a lot of thinking and a lot of questions. And even the eligibility question, the sports question, of course, because we're a Dyna, that's come up. We've had discussions around that already about what the state statute requires for us, what our district can declare as our eligibility compared to what that student might be giving up if they hope to play with a neighborhood team, and that they would negatively impact their eligibility in War Road because they're attending our school, but they really want to be on the War Road team. And geez, it would be awful if we didn't let that student know that by participating in our academics, you can't play in their athletics, right? And so that is very much all a part of this planning as well. We imagine something beyond what is sustainable to something that is different, and that I think if you just explore what's going on in the state of Minnesota, we aren't an outlier in exploring this area and trying to be prepared to offer this. We are part of the group of districts across the state, particularly the state of Minnesota, with such generous open enrollment rules. We're making sure that our presence is available for kids across this state, including those that are currently attending our district. So that is very much the challenge of this project, and I can't wait for 2 years from now when it's running amazing and it's all figured out, because that'll be great. I will be fully balled by then.
Always remember the analogy.
And the athletics pull is not, like when Sean uses the example of athletes, right? We have athletes that are in tennis training, like in Florida training for the summer. We have junior hockey players that are playing on junior hockey teams and not being able to access the Dyna education, right?
Yeah, I know it's like both ways.
Yeah.
I know it's both ways. So
Yeah.
it's hard to figure out.
Market,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Just to circle back to what Dr. Stanley was asking the board, which was, do we feel like we want to continue along this path, or if there's something you've heard that says maybe we don't? I wasn't here, of course, when this started and so on and so forth, and I'm not necessarily privy to every single conversation where it came from. But I guess my comment would be is that regardless of the pandemic, regardless of that happening, right? We're having a generational change right now in primary education, secondary education, which we've already seen in higher education. So the argument is that do we feel we want to have a viable solution in that space? If you just ask that question, yes or no, I'd be interested to know what we feel about that, while we're then figuring out, okay, well, what is the best program for us to then do? If we're not sure that the answer to that first question is yes, then you're right, we should stop and talk more about that. That's what I heard Dr. Stanley asking. So I'm just trying to frame it more succinctly in that way. Is there a question about that?
That's what I felt like I was hearing a little bit, and so I just need some clarity about that. Because it is a lot of time investment, and, you know, when I'm hearing, I mean, I don't know if this is a direction that we should go, I don't know if this aligns with our strategic plan.
So I personally absolutely think it's worthwhile. I think it's exciting. I think that for me, I think that I would like to see something, whether it's a guide and change document or something, I would like to see information around that. And then as well, I would like to see some information around envisioning, because I do think there's a difference between a more boutique program, 100, 150 students, and what some of these processes look like at 150 students. And then I would like to see, what do you envision? I'm actually like, whoever said it, I don't know who, but I'm not actually concerned about the academics. I 100% trust you guys to fully vet and figure out the academics. I mean, you're an outstanding team. It's more some of those soft skills and how this engages with the extracurriculars, the, if we have kids on IEPs. So I would like to see personally some more information about if we do get to a 500, whatever, a much larger program, what does that look like? And how do you envision that? Because I maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's more the trepidation, is a large number of students in the program, not necessarily having this as an offering for kids K to 12.
Right, because you heard questions around capacity.
Yes.
You heard questions about choices in terms of, well, we
Yes.
do this,
Yeah.
does it take from this?
Yeah. So I
Versus it all just being a,
Yes, so
rising.
I think it's really around that, is like, at what point, or is there a point where we get to, do we ever get to the point where we're diluting what we're offering right now, I think is the essence. And I think it's hard for me too, to envision a completely different type of like extracurricular, which if you're a standalone program, I'm sure it's like, we could have our own newspaper, our own yearbook, our own this, our own that. And so I think that's part of it. So that's what I would personally ask for as a follow-up, but I'm not interested in pursuing this.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question about the follow-up piece? Is the follow-up piece then to do the follow-up work before they continue to advertise and market the program? Or is it in conjunction with doing
I
that?
think it's personally in conjunction, because I don't see it like next year being 500 students.
Right.
So
I just didn't know if, like, to me, the question I have is 91 students by when? Like, do you have to have those 91 students enrolled by July, March,
Yeah.
April? You know, when is it a no-go? And so then my question is, if we're gonna ask them to hold off on this from the marketing standpoint, that's a big question, right? And so,
Yeah, we need the students in order to run the program and create it in a way that it stands alone, and we're able to offer all those extracurriculars and intentional programming and support. So we don't have a drop dead date yet for that, but the teeter totter analogy is perfect.
It's a tricky question to answer at the high school, because there will be courses offered virtually at the high school, or already we know this next year. And so will we have all of them that we would have in a comprehensive program? Probably not. And to me, that's the more trepidatious time. It's that in-between time between now and when we've arrived and have a full standalone K-12 with teachers that are just teaching the online versus split between maybe with the student support services. That feels like that'll be the time to exhale. Like, but it's stretching ourselves currently to reach that point that's going to be hard work.
There will be an in-between time, right?
But I want to make sure we hear from, because you had a great point, Dan, and I want to make sure everyone else on the board has a chance to
So
jump in.
I do think that this is an important piece of education moving forward, and, you know, supported it last year when we talked about going for the accreditation. I think if I pull myself out of this situation and say, okay, you are a school board member and you need something tangible within our scope of governance to work through this. I think that's the guiding change document piece, or whatever we want to call it. I think it's knowing that we have come together as a board to say, these are acceptable outcomes and these are unacceptable outcomes. And that, to me, can happen parallel path to what you've got going on, because I agree, we aren't gonna, it's not gonna be a huge program next year, nor do I want it to be, because we need that time to grow and to learn. So to me, that's the piece as a board member that maybe I feel like I'm missing when I'm asking myself, when you're presenting and I'm running it through that filter, right? When you're saying we want to do this, I don't have that filter to run it through. The only filter I have is the strategic plan. So in absence of kind of a specific online thing, that's really the only filter that I can lean into. And I think this program deserves a standalone filter from a board perspective. So that would be my recommendation.
I'll go. I think Janie, you put that, what she just said there, I agree with. I think when I look at, when I'm in support of doing this program, I think it's the growth factor is where I would like, and I think a document like that would say, okay, are we gonna stick to boutique because what happened, what is the impact? I don't think it would be negative impacts of these things, but there is impact, right? And what's our plan to respond to it? And I'm not even like, oh, 10,000 students under our umbrella in 10 years from now, that might be totally fine if we plan for it and we're smart. I also know that growth doesn't go like this, right? For our kids or anybody. And so I understand that. So the parallel path of doing this, I'm comfortable with. I thought that tonight was actually, this has been a really good conversation. I feel like I have a deeper understanding of all the things you guys are thinking about. Not that I would think that you weren't, but there's so many elements to it, right? There's a lot of elements to it. So, yeah, that's all I got. Is that helpful? Did I explain?
Karen?
Yeah, I'm just very nervous. As someone who has taught online for 2 years, and I understand that it's an emergency teaching that I've been doing, I just know all the unexpecteds that pop up, and I just worry about our capacity, and I worry about the people doing the work. And it doesn't mean I'm a no, but I just keep coming back to our why, and I keep coming back to our, we don't get to choose the students that sign up for this, and they will come with strengths and they will come with weaknesses, and our system in some areas is already heavily taxed. And I hope I'm wrong. I just want us to be able to offer a program that is as dynamic as what we offer in our classrooms. And I just need time, I think, to get there.
Okay. Do you feel like you have clear direction for next steps from us?
Yes.
Are you sure? Sean, you look feel better. So maybe, I don't know when, you guys can talk about coming back to us for a work session with some more information. And we can talk about it. Yeah.
One last comment about the clarification is that nothing in your plan indicated that we're married to or forced to have unfettered growth.
Right.
We get to decide on how many students you want to have in this particular program. Is that correct?
Sure, got it out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even as we grow, right? Those
Right.
can be the benchmarks and the checkpoints of
Yeah.
this is where we want it to be. Yeah, can we grow? You know?
Especially if some of the concerns that have been raised as you go through this do appear.
Yeah.
That, oh, okay, doesn't mean it has to be over, but like, you could pause and say, okay, we're gonna stay at this 91 level until we figure this out, and then either we then have a decision, do we wanna go further with that or not?
Right.
So I just wanna make sure we're clear about, it's not just,
Yeah, same concept.
However, However, it's been very clearly stated that we want this to be a viable financial program and not a drain on the system.
Which is
So
the
Michael,
90.
although your point is there, it is important to make note that we are hoping that this program is not a pull on the system.
Yes, I think it was based on the assumption, Karen, that when Sean talks about 91 being the break-even point, that was the level of minimum growth to get to in order for it to be viable.
Yep.
That I don't think anyone's going to be excited if it's 50 and it's not viable, but we're still doing it anyway. The only way I would think you could even get a remote support for that is you had one pilot year of trying to do something on your guaranteed of something that you couldn't guarantee. That's where the risk would then come into play. But I agree, Karen, it's more of trying to take his point of a level of stability or level of break even that he was looking for at 91. That's what I was talking about.
Well, and we've already defined that would be out of scope. That one thing that we have said as a board is that it has to be financially viable. So that really is our lowest threshold.
Yeah, and then one comment I was gonna piggyback on was that, being able to control the number of people, also you have the ability, like I'm concerned about the taxing of the support services and all those kind of things too. And so I assume that if we get to certain points, we'll be able to say, we're not meeting our literacy goals with the online students. We need to slow that down and say, what do we need to throw in to help get to where we want to get from that goal of measurement plan? And I think we still control a lot of those things right now, or right now and in the near term future that we can adjust to that on the fly. I mean, obviously that's kind of your world, right? So I mean, I think that's probably where I would look to you all to say, you know what, we need more help from X, in whether it's financial or whether it's resources or technology or whatever. That's where I would kind of say that, we get to evaluate as we go a little bit.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, all the work. Next up is Early Learning Center.
Okay, I'm being told to just press next.
You might have to, is it working?
No, yet.
I think if you
have to
go,
go, yeah.
What's happening on screen? Say it again.
I think hit escape.
so if you just go on see if you look up and there's another tab up there,
View
There you go,
tabs.
yeah,
Gotcha.
No,
and then,
click on the
March 14th.
March 14th for special. We won't see Karen's face.
Bye, Karen.
Bye,
Okay.
Karen. There we go.
Gotcha. Thank you. Good evening, all of you.
Hello.
School board members and Superintendent Stanley, colleagues and community. I'm Valerie Burke, the Director of Community Education here in Edina, and I'm here with my colleague Leah Bird, our Early Learning Center Coordinator. Tonight, we're here to review with you additional data and information regarding our ECFE class offerings, our building capacity, how we gather community input, and other learnings. But I'd like to begin with what is the Edina Learning Center and how does it support young children and their families as they thrive as learners? The ELC is a comprehensive system of supports, programs and classes for children birth through kindergarten ready and their parents and their caregivers. We support the entire family system. We do this through home visiting where a licensed parent educator visits home for families who need information but are unable to attend our Early Learning Center classes. We do this through preschool screening for our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, where screening helps parents understand the developmental milestones their children have achieved and supports families through referrals or assistance if needed. We provide financial supports with our school readiness and early childhood family education state aid and levy dollars to ensure all families have access to our programs and classes. In addition, our school readiness and Dyna resource manager will meet with families individually to support them as they apply for Pathway 1 and 2 scholarships or other community resources. We invite all of our community through a variety of methods of communication to be part of our baby and toddler classes or our 2-year-old and preschool classes. And we provide sibling care, wraparound childcare, and enrichment classes to give families an array of robust options. Another constant for the Edina Learning Center is a full array of early childhood special education services to support young children, to meet them where they're at. And finally, the golden thread that weaves all of our programming is our early childhood family education programming, provided for families birth through kindergarten ready. This is where the magic of high quality parent education lives, and this is where the magic of building a community of support for families lives. So this is our differentiator, and this is what we're going to talk with you about tonight. So I'd like to invite Iep Bird to begin the information sharing.
Well, hi, everybody. And before I start, I have 2 quick points that I need to make. The first one, I want to just start by thanking Val and Julie, who were here for me last time. I never go on vacation, and the one time I do, there's a board report due. And then I also just want to point out, yes, I am wearing 4 pairs of socks today. It's crazy sock day in the Early Learning Center today. And so if you zone out a little bit, check out my socks. So I'm going to start with the first slide, just talking a little bit about community input and some of the class offerings that we have in the ELC. In order to do our program and our planning, we do gather community input in a couple of different ways. We have our community needs assessment that we do. We have parent feedback via surveys. Parents are always given surveys at the end of a class, asking how the class was, what do they like, if there's any programming that we don't offer that they would like to see offered, what would that be? We get a lot of emails from families, and I am always encouraging and grateful that families are comfortable to stop into my office and share with me a little bit about what they love about early learning and any new stuff that they might want us to bring forward in not just the coming year, but even in the coming months, if there's something out there that they're interested in taking. We also vet our programming through our PTO every year. PTO meets once a month. And typically in the fall is when we start talking about programming for the following fall. And in that conversation, I'm really sharing with the PTO, these are the classes that are popular this year and we're thinking about offering again next year. Here's some of the changes that are sort of on the table right now. What would work? What do you think, would be a good fit? What might not be a good fit? Is there any big piece that I'm missing around school start and end times? If you have to drop a kiddo off at elementary, how much time might you need to get to the ELC? Or if you have a kiddo at another program in the community, how much time might you need to come to the ELC? So the PTO really helps me with vetting those out and talking through programming. I also do the same thing with parent educators. Again, I meet with the parent educators once a month. And during those conversations, we talk a lot about the classes that they're currently teaching. What are the patterns and trends that are coming up for them? What are they hearing from the community? And then we also talk a little bit about programming for next year. Typically, I try to get through the first 3 weeks of school before we shift into planning for the next fall. And then I kind of live in 2 years for a while. And part of the conversation with not just the parent educators is about what are they hearing, but also what classes might they want to teach that we may consider offering in the future, that their expertise and their feedback has shared that might be important. And then just like all community ed programming, enrollments really help drive our offerings for the future year. So those are some of the ways that we collect community input. It's important to share with you that the school year class offerings have remained consistent, both with the class type and the class offering. So the type would really be, is it a baby class? Is it a toddler class? Is it a preschool class? Is it an adult only class? The offerings is really more about some of the sections. Are we offering one section of it, or are we offering 2 or 3 sections of it? And we'll speak a little bit more about the next part when we come back in May to talk really about future planning. But I did just want to share a little bit about summer programming. We have been able to partner with our colleagues in community ed programming when you think of youth and adult programming. And we have been able to offer 2 to 5-year-old youth programming. There are 36 preschool camps planned this summer. and 23 of those will be taught by ELC staff. And then for many of you in the room, some of you may not know, there's a program called Dyna. And Dyna is a collaboration that we have with Hopkins Public Schools. So it's Hopkins Public Schools and Edina Public Schools. Dyna is a collaboration for some of our secondary students and some of our early childhood students. Dyna serves 120 incoming kindergartners, 60 from each district. Dyna is really targeted at kiddos who have not had any preschool, any early learning experience. And so Tabitha Dennison, who is our outreach manager, she works pretty diligently to make sure that she's reaching out and trying to find the families, those 60 kiddos that not only haven't gone to the ELC, but have also not gone to a Berry Patch or a ABC's or a Normandale or any of those things. They just really haven't had much of an early learning experience. So that's our first way. We also work with building principals to ask, do you have a family where you might know of a younger sibling who isn't having an early learning experience as well? And then the very last case scenario would be that Tabitha does come and ask ELC teachers, do you know of any kiddos or any families who might potentially benefit from this program? If they are an ELC kiddo, then we do a little bit more vetting. We look at their TSG data. We kind of look at some of their other scores, just to see, are they a good candidate for a kindergarten program for kiddos who haven't had one. Dyna is a 3-week program that typically happens in July and August and is in its 5th year. So it's a pretty well-run machine at this point. So I'm going to move on to facility capacity. So in the Early Learning Center, there are 20 classrooms, and we allocate out those classrooms to different programming or departments or needs. And those 20 classrooms, that space allocation can fluctuate each year depending on our enrollment and our sections and our offerings that we have. So the majority of our classroom spaces go either to our ECFE classrooms or our preschool classrooms. We also have 2 classrooms that are set aside for care. One is our sibling care room, and the other one is our child care classroom, which we call extended learning downstairs. Special education, as you all know, we collaborate with ECSE and strive to be an inclusive school. And so, but there are a couple of classrooms that are for ECSE only kiddos and learners. And then lastly, we do use some of our classroom spaces for our parent education classrooms, whether it's a parenting education classroom that is a part of an ECFE traditional model, or it's an adult only parenting ed classroom. We use that for that. And enrollment capacity varies based on class offerings, types, and sections. And when I was practicing this today, I was like, okay, how detailed does one get? Because I want to give you the information, but I don't want you to glaze over, so stick with me. When we think about a classroom space in the Early Learning Center, if we're serving one of our all-day classrooms, so next year we'll have an all-day 3-year-old room and we'll have some all-day 4-year-old rooms. An all-day classroom serves kids, the same group of kids, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Typically they come for the entire day, and that serves 20 kids. In early childhood, the ratio is 1 to 10, and you cannot exceed 20 kids in kiddos 3, 4, or 5 years old. So one classroom for an all-day class is 20 kids. If that same classroom were to house 2 half-day sections, say it was a morning 5-day and an afternoon 5-day, now that same classroom can house and serve 20 or 40 kids, excuse me. But we also have another model that we sometimes do downstairs where we do a 3-day-a-week morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, and a 2-day-a-week morning, Tuesday, Thursday morning. Some of you may remember this when you were parents. That same model of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a Tuesday, Thursday can also happen in the afternoon. So that classroom could now have 4 sections in it, which is up to 80 kids. So you can really see how the capacity of just even one classroom can vary based on the section and the offerings that we have in that room. It's also important to share that spaces that we are using for kiddos, for kids classrooms, those can double, right? So sometimes we have it as a parenting ed room in the morning, and we might use it for maybe a one-off classroom in the afternoon. An example is Teacher Brenda. If any of you know Teacher Brenda, she teaches our baby classes in the mornings. But as you all know, babies take naps. So in the afternoon, we typically tend to use Brenda's classroom for enrichment classes. Or a couple of years ago, we did our Wacky Wednesdays where we had like pumpkin patches. We would use her room for that stuff as well. And I just wanted to share with the group that the facility capacity does not affect our ability to have a full array of early learning programming. In all of the time that I've been able to work for Edina and really focus on programming, the building facility hasn't really been a deciding factor in that. The capacity hasn't been our deciding factor. We're really able to offer the programming that fills up that people register for. Thanks, Scott. And then the last slide I want to share is a little bit about the pipeline to kindergarten, and then speak just a touch about some of our census data. So as of March 7th, Edina Public Schools has 591 incoming kindergartners for next school year, 22-23. This current school year, the 21-22 school year, we're serving 141 four-year-olds downstairs. Of those 141 four-year-olds, we have 89 of them, or 63%, will go on to Edina Public Schools kindergarten. 79 of those 89 are district residents. Of the 89 ELC preschoolers that are four-year-olds, that makes up 15% of next year's incoming kindergarten class. And the next thing I want to share is the census information. So we did pull the census information from the work that Hazel Reinhardt did, and then we also collaborated a little bit with Greg Gusweiler. I'm glad I didn't call him Gus Gregweiler, which I sometimes do. So from 2012 to 2013, and then up to the 21-22 school year, Edina Public Schools averages 497 resident kindergarten enrollees. District-wide, we average approximately 575 to 650 kindergarten enrollments a year. Does that make sense? So 497 are residents, but the total kindergarten class averages around 575 to 650. And so the last slide is just questions that you have for us.
Thank you.
Yes, I have 4 clean socks at home.
Like last time, if you could click back so we can see Karen, that would be great.
Oh,
Just
Okay.
click on the
Yeah, click on
Google.
the Google.
No, for left-hand corner tab.
okay,
There you go.
gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Karen.
And again, like last time, there's no pending decisions for us to make if you want to ask questions. And then I know that did we set a date in a few months they're going to be presenting to us?
In May.
May. Great.
What is that in May?
They're going to be presenting to us strategic approach for the early learning center. Yep.
Well, I know
I'll
that-
go first on this one.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. Leah, can you explain to me where it says sections offered versus classes offered? And that would be, actually, I think I know the answer, but on slide 32 of our board packet, it would be the historical, it's like the first slide. So like where it says baby classes, there were 6 classes and then 26 sections offered?
Yep. So the sections that are offered is what comes out in our catalog. So we might have, I'll use an example of 1823, which is one of our classrooms, tender tots or toddler tykes or baby sampler. So in the catalog, we may offer 3 sections of tender tots, but we only run 2 of those sections. So that's where you see of all the baby classes for if you're okay, I'll use the 1920 year. Of all the baby classes, we offered 18 different baby classes. That could have been classes and sections. And we ultimately, for the 19-20 school year, we ran 15 of the 18 that we offered.
Okay, great. While we're on that slide, can you
Karen,
remind those of us who, yeah,
So Karen, I wanted to get more clarification on that. So if I'm looking at that, say 2014-15, 6 classes, 26 sections offered, 19 sections ran. Is 26 the number of days?
No, it's the number of sections. So there's 6 different baby classes,
Mm-hmm.
and there's 26 of those, there's 26 sections.
So when you have the more detailed information that you had asked for, there's 26 for 2014.
So some of those could be a one-day event?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I read that thinking, the confusing part is we have elementary schools that don't even have 26 sections.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so there's clarification there that some of those are a one-day event.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead.
no, thanks, Janie. Can you refresh memories here? When did we change start times? Was that 17, 18? Does anyone remember?
Yeah, I think I have it on my last
It
thing,
was
but it was 18, 19.
I
Is
think,
that
yeah,
what
We
it
made the
was?
decision
18.
17, 18, and then implemented
18.
18, 19.
18, 19. And I know you gave us great data broken down by year. Thank you. As you've looked at data, did you notice a big shift when that happened?
Well, go ahead.
No. I can say, as we look back on the totality of it, I definitely noticed that as we shifted times, we were trying to line up more with our school times, which was the 9 o'clock for middle school and the new elementary. And reflecting, probably didn't pay as much attention to what our competitors were doing, because there are many, many families at the Early Learning Center that do dual enrollment. They might be at one preschool for a little bit and then come over for an early childhood family education. So I do remember us having a lot of conversations about what it was going to be in that parking lot, how we were going to manage busing, et cetera. And to be honest, I don't remember us having a lot of conversations, and Leah, you add on saying, what does that mean to the larger world? So,
Yeah, I would agree and concur with that. When we changed the start and end times, we were purposeful about trying to align with the district as close as we could. And part of that is because our special education students take busing to the ELC, and so they are rolled into that start and end time. So we think a little bit about those kiddos and when they are and aren't able to get to the school. But the other piece of feedback that I would say I primarily hear from my PTO group is about, well, I have a kid at another preschool in town on, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so if we're gonna take a class here, I need you to be done by this time, because then I can bring them from that school maybe over here for that ECFE class. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I heard Erica say that the next time you come to us, you're going to have some recommendations. I'm wondering too, if you can kind of outline for us what resources you need to be able to make that happen, and what measurements we should use and timeline. Like if you have certain goals, what we should be measuring, and along with that, shoot, it just got scared out of me. If we could see, what is the catalog look for next year? What if you just because it's hard with the pandemic to kind of know what next year will look like. We still can't have those little ones vaccinated, but what was the approach you took with this year's catalog? And that's my last question.
I'm gonna backwards track it. The catalog for this year was a pretty collaborative effort. We are trying to, the pandemic, affected the amount of parents that we could have in the building and the classes that we offered. And so for this year's catalog that came out, we really tried to go back to what ECFE was, to offer a variety of classes, and not just a variety of like models or out of titles, but just a variety in times, days of the week. One of the things that we heard from families is, I want an early evening class. I want a Saturday class. I want a 1 day a week class. So we tried with this year's catalog to really offer sort of everything out there that the feedback was that we heard in doing it. And so that was the strategy, to really see our families ready to come back into the building. And you're right, Karen, there are comments about, you know, my little can't get vaccinated just yet. And so I'm kind of feeling that out about how comfortable I feel coming into the building. I definitely think when we come back in May, we can start with a skeleton of what programming will look like next year. I mean, there's some pieces that we always return with, right? Like our 3s and our 4-year-old model are pretty set in stone, and we sort of know how that operates and what works well. And so our attention is really more towards ECFE programming. And when we think about, you know, what are the resources, measurement, and timeline, the resources that we need are really just the time to really interview our families. And then also we need to get a better handle on our community as a whole. Who are the parents in Edina? Who are the parents that are having babies, and what does parenting ed look like for them? What is it that they want? What would make them either want to come into our school or take a class online or virtual, however they might want to take it? So that's really where the time and attention needs to go to. And the measurement around that is really sort of, what are the classes that families want and are interested in? And are we currently offering those classes and we just need to change the days or the times? Or do we need to kind of revamp the whole model so that we're really offering programming in that they're not seeing that they might be interested in? The other piece and the other goal that we have is to really start partnering with our other preschools in the community, especially around that parenting ed piece. How can we meet families where they're at and offer programming that they might be interested in? So really the first step, Karen, is to spend the time and the energy on gathering that data from our community, finding out who is our community out there in terms of like the parents in Edina, and then what is it that they want to make parenting education and ECFE programming viable for them.
Awesome. That'd be great. And I don't know if the rest of the board members would want that, but like specifics about what would be ideal. I mean, if you had your way, how would you do that? And, you know, as we look at, we were just discussing the virtual academy, you know, allocating dollars for marketing in that same way, to really reach those people that are like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. So, okay, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So thanks for all this data. I have to say I'm a little overwhelmed by the data because I'm trying to track it back from the other presentations from before.
And it's just a quick caveat, Julie, and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but
it's fine.
We were backtracking too, to making sure does this data line up with back data. And it is really literally, we have students who enter and leave our system every month. So there'll be like a 5, you know, so just don't get distracted by that, because sometimes, you know, get distracted if you want to, but I'm just letting you know. And that's why we were trying to be specific about this. Was as a 2-1-22 and this is a 3-7, because there is movement. Again, these are choice classes. People move in and out all the time. I mean, in elementary they do as well, but it can be even a little bit more at times. And so you ask your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think part of what, at least how I come at this is, in order to sit in this spot and govern the way that I hope to, I want to just have a really good idea of where we are, so that when you guys come back with a plan and a strategy, I can apply that and look at, be like, okay, that makes sense, and I can see the through lines.
Yes.
So that's the place where I come for my questions. But a follow-up one to what Karen was saying. So when we talk about community input, I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but I noticed the advisory board of ELC isn't listed in here under community input. And I know state statute is we have to have that in place for stuff for ECFE. So is that just not listed, or are we using that?
Yeah, so there is an advisory council rolled into the PTO. So when we talk about the PTO, the parent teacher group, that also has the advisory council rolled into it. So I apologize if that was misunderstood.
But they've historically operated separately, or when was?
No, the PTO has been the ECFE advisory for quite a long time.
It's been a
They
PTO
renamed
in my
themselves,
tenure.
they became a nonprofit like the other parent organizations
Right.
in order to do better fundraising, but they are Parent Advisory Council for ECFE.
So it's a dual element,
It's a
PTO
dual- yeah.
advisory, it's
And we've
all-
actually had that discussion, and that is part of the discussion we're having as we look ahead,
Right.
is do we need to get back more to the roots of the advisory council and the clarity of roles?
Right.
So, just because PTOs kind of have an ebb and flow about, do you lean too far onto just the fundraising and kind of forget about your mission statement? So will be part of the stuff we'll bring back.
And then is this, when you were talking about getting feedback from the community, are you guys doing like surveys? It's like, how is that happening? Because you said you were gonna be out doing outreach to get the plan ready. I guess I'm not totally following what resources are being tapped.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that you can survey the larger community, and one of the primary ways is through the census data. We can use the emails that come with that as well. And then we also do our surveys on our, any class when a family leaves, and ask them as well, what is it that you like, what is it that you don't like? But that's really a growth area for us, is to figure out who is our community out there that we need to survey, and then how do we survey them and get them to answer, right? Because one of the things that we hear sometimes is, you give too many surveys. So how do we make sure that we can get a large global amount of data from our community as a whole? So that's sort of one of our growth areas.
Okay, great. That would be great when in the plan then to see where all that
Yeah.
data comes from. Okay, that's great. And then I have a capacity question. So you're explaining the capacity, and I'm looking at the numbers, and then you, Leah, you made a comment about the types and number of offerings have stayed consistent. Where are we at in terms of capacity? Like, I know we have 20 classrooms, but like, are we at 50% capacity with our enrollment numbers? Are we at 75% capacity? That I think would be really good information. You don't have to answer that right now, but when you come back to look at, to help drive the goal, like where are we? Because when I look at all these numbers, mine immediately go to, well, what was the goal in 2014-15? And did we hit it? And what does that look like and how we're adjusting? So I think that.
Do you mean, just to clarify, do you mean like, so in 2014-15 in babies, there were 6 classes, 26 offered and 19 actually happened, so 7 were canceled for whatever the reasons were. You're asking, okay, of that 19 that ran, where was that to the overall goal that they had established?
No, not necessarily. I'm looking at, there's 26 classes. Maybe one was a one-day class that ran. What percentage of time can we fill classrooms down in the early learning center that we're not filling them, or are we filling them? I don't know.
About capacity of space use.
Capacity of
Right.
space use for enrollment and that connection piece, because I can't say like, oh yeah, that seems like a reasonable goal and a reasonable plan.
Right.
I don't know.
Against what?
Exactly.
No,
So like
against what?
where we are going. So, and I do believe that I know you guys do a good job of using the space for the classes and planning all that out. I know that.
Yeah.
But where's the wiggle room? Because our enrollment numbers are significantly lower over the last years. Minus the last 2 years, there's still a decline that I'm seeing. So that's what I need to take a look at as you guys bring that back. So that was my other piece. And then the other thing that I had was, so the number, I thought this was a really interesting number, the 63% of them continuing on to EPS in kindergarten. I don't know if you can find this or not, but like, I would love to know, what is that on average? Is that higher than normal? Is it less than normal? Over a bit of historical data on that, so that we can say, maybe that's another goal. Like, our goal is to continue that. Or maybe it's not, I don't know. But that's something I would challenge you to think about, and because that number jumped out to me as something, I don't know if this is great, or we're lower. I don't know.
Honestly, Julie,
So-
this might be foundational because we just started getting our students into campus on a regular basis. And
Which is where
so
we pull that data
where
from.
we pull that, yeah, and they're still honestly not talking completely accurately together.
Yeah.
And so we're using this as baseline, and we can try to dig back, but we did not have that capacity to be able to see the numbers, and we weren't asking that question. So
Yeah.
so that, because I sort of anticipated that too, like how do we move forward?
Right, and I think, and that's okay if we don't have it, but I would love to see it included so that we can track it and look ahead to
Yeah.
say like, okay,
Right.
where are we at in 2 years? Where are we at here? How are we growing there and whatever.
I
So,
think it would also be a great exit survey question to ask.
Yes.
Parents as part of, when you ask them if they enjoyed their class,
Where are you
Where-
going next or what?
where are you
Yeah.
going next? And if they don't choose Edina Public Schools, I think it would be really important to ask why or why not, because that's essential data for us to know as a district.
Yep.
So,
We intentionally left off the last 2 years of data for this because it is so skewed that it doesn't really participate in there. So in a way, we're kind of going back and then starting. As you were kind of talking about class capacity, one of the things we did do as we were building the catalog is I brought Leah up to our full robust enrichment team group as well to kind of talk about what are the ways that we can really just start getting families back in the building. Because that's part of the part that I think has just been lost in as we didn't have parents coming in and et cetera. And many of those ways are some of the informal things that we're doing. You know, we're going to have some, open parent education Fridays. Come on in and just, sit down and have your lunch, and hopefully we can be in the building. The enrichment classes that we're doing for families that want a little bit more in their day, but aren't looking for an all-day experiences. So those kind of different offerings, we have ideas that we'll bring back about pop-ups, because as much as we can do survey by paper or online or whatever, I think it's really going to be boots on the ground, getting out, having conversations at different preschools. I mean, I was doing some informal checking with our Edina Resource Center coordinator. In the last 8 years, there's been over 16 new infant through age 5 preschools, or infant daycare offerings, right? We dropped off with any infant daycare. But clearly, and I can't tell you fact-based, but I can tell you that trends tell me we have more dual parents who need all-day infant. That takes a group away from us, right? You were asking about, what's your capture rate? We don't have that deep of data, but there are indicators that when we look at different factors, kind of give me information that says, well, maybe we need to get up to them, and that's what we're talking about. But we really think there's got to be a lot more face time with families as well as just information gathering. But we saw a fabulous stream today that was really cheered us on Edina Moms that was all about, I love it over there, blah, blah, blah. We need that kind of buzz, just like as you start, right?
Me on Edina Moms.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just, that's what we need. It's like with any of the new programs, there has to be some buzz.
Can I also just say that, whenever you're asking about data, right, from the participants that you're trying to get that information from, how effective you are about what you're going to do with it is really important.
That's
That
a
helps
great
get them
point,
off
yeah.
of their
Yeah.
reluctancy to do that. I've heard through the community a lot to where well, we're not listening, or we don't care, we're not paying attention, whatever. It's like, well, here we are wanting to ask you, this is exactly what we're going to use this information for, to figure out how we can make our offerings better and more relevant to you from time, location, whatever it might be. Sometimes we need to, not so much verbally, but when you're asking, so here's what you're going to use this data for.
Yeah.
Why it's so important to us. I think sometimes that can also help smooth out people's hesitancy or lack of care about doing it.
Thanks for that tip. The only other question I have, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues here, is for ECFE. I know that I think that part of what you just said, Val, about the connection piece and the families and the investment, that is, to me, one of the tenets of ECFE, right? Like, it is a shining, it can be an effective shining light here. I think it has been. And so I, as a board member, feel it's actually a huge part of our strategy into getting people to sink their teeth into Edina Public Schools, and it's that face-to-face time. So it's more than, the benefits are outrageously good for families and kids and the teachers and learning, all of that stuff, right? But it's this other piece of our community and building that strength and the community piece that I really hope to see in the plan and how that is really robust. I mean, I know in our strategic plan, it's not as laid out and it's, you know, it's a bullet as to the robust programming.
Yeah.
But I think that it's just an enormous opportunity that I think we can expand on, so.
When we did our rebranding and then when we had our larger group discussion this spring, we really relooked at the language because there's a fine line between you're coming into an educational institution with your darling baby, and we're inviting you in to join a community of people that are going to support you. And so we tried to, in our catalog, really kind of take a step back, not that we're not super proud about all the alignment, but you might have mentioned it, Janie. We need that balance because first we need to have that invitation of people to really want to share their most precious piece with us. Because what we see from conversation threads is if we get them in the door, they want to stay there. I mean, people contorted by driving from place to place because they wanted to be there. So we just need them in the door. And so we will make that happen. But I think there's a whole lot of pieces about, especially after a pandemic, people are hesitant with their precious resource. And we really need to respect that by the invitation.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll pass it on.
I can jump in. Some of my thoughts in going through this kind of piggyback off of what you just said, Val, I think, and Julie just alluded to, the community piece, right? I think we had a few years, and I think the numbers will show where this may sound harsh, but I think we forgot who our target child was or our target family. I think we didn't know. I think we made some assumptions, and I'm excited for you to come back in May because I love hearing that you're going to be seeking more input to kind of create some examples of who is our child in one of these classrooms, who is the parent, and really understanding them and their needs. Joys and concerns. Everybody knows that. That's what builds community. And joys and concerns that's the heartbeat of ECFD, right? That's where parents become vulnerable and that's where community is built. And I think when I look at next year's schedule that you have out there, the catalog, I am thrilled by the amount of opportunity. But as Julie alluded to, what I kind of want to understand is that is a really full building. When I look at that, I think that is what I think of as the early learning center, kids running down the hallways, right? Classes rotating one after the other. Where does that compare? If you were to fill all of those seats, where does that compare to where we have been? That's the piece that I'm struggling to understand.
What honestly, so where we're at, so pretend like we put those 2 years back in, we have a place to go to a lot of runaround. So there's a woo factor back. And there's a balance with choice programs. If you throw too many of them, you get 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You know, 2, 2, 2, and that is not a healthy, robust, I want to be there class.
Right.
So we're playing around right now. And again, when we built this, we're still in pandemic. So we are deciding, you know, the discussion is we really kind of have married ourselves to a consistent, so parents can look at a catalog, look at their year and make a plan. And then circumstances have changed. So do we want to come out with some new material? Do we want to dilute what we put out there with as input comes in? So I don't have that answer yet, but that is really it. So really what we're starting to build as benchmarks are we need 10 to 20% more than we had last year.
Right.
And kind of, again, like almost like the discussion you had with EVA. What does that look like? How is our building impacted? How are we going, where's our capacity that we can move on from there? So we're trying to be realistic, not be like, oh my God, we're gonna be full, because it's going to be re-wooing. And like you said, being in a lot of places and reminding people, you know, finding out who is this post-COVID person who's bringing their precious resource to us.
So the catalog for next year, if you were to fill all of those ECFD classes, would that mean to you that you would need more parent education staff than what you currently have? Is that the goal based on that
Yeah.
catalog?
So I haven't done any staffing for next school year yet, and staffing is also based on registrations
Right.
and how classes fill. And so I don't have a great answer for you because the 2 parent eds that I currently have are part-time people and they choose to be part-time
Mhm.
people. Both of them have said they have the capacity to grow their hours. So on the one hand, I potentially could have both of them do all of those classes. In the same breath, if you look at the catalog, you'll notice 2 parent educators couldn't teach 3 classes at the same time.
Right.
So we have to really look at, once we look at how our offerings are and what is and isn't filling, then my next step will be to see, okay, I have to hire a parent educator for a Thursday night class and a Tuesday morning class and a Wednesday afternoon class. And then that becomes a position. So, and it's actually the same thing, not just with the parent educators, but with all of the staff, right? So we purposely have a lot of offerings at a lot of different times. And then as registration comes through, we staff it. And then if we need to, then we post positions and we hire more staff.
I think what I was trying to wrap my brain around with the data that you provided was, are we offering the same amount of parent education time, right? Because we can see class offerings, but is this parent education time, to me, is just as crucial in our community as preschool time. And so if there's a way when you come back in May to kind of visualize that, that may be helpful. And then the last thing I was going to ask, and it kind of had to do with Julie's question about the advisory. And forgive me because I haven't wrapped at all on the board, but how large is the current PTO?
So for this current school year, there are 6 people that are on the PTO.
Okay.
I've already started recruitment for next year and we're sitting at 12 people
Okay.
For next year. That's all people who are currently in ECFE classes this year. And I go to the classrooms every year, I visit the rooms, make a little elevator pitch, then I typically send an email out, and then the parent educators will also nominate people, and then I'll call them and kind of give them a little bit more detail,
Okay.
what the role entails. If any of you know Heather English, she likes to call it PTO light as compared to some of our elementary schools, but this year we have 6 people, and next year we will double up, we have 12 that are right now. I can say that because, like as Val said, I mean, there is fluidity in students attending school, and you do have to be a student to be on the PTO. So I'm hoping to stay at a minimum of 12. But really, again, our goal is to get it closer to 12 to 16. And selfishly, I'd love 20 people because you can't have everybody at every Saturday event, right? But if you can have a handful of them there to help out, that's a good, healthy amount of parents that are there. And that's all free marketing and word of mouth, right?
And my last question about that would be just a wonder that I have, that if you had an advisory committee, could that possibly bring in other people, maybe veterans to the program, other voices to the program that would be beneficial to kind of what you were talking about of gathering feedback and kind of getting more into, who are we going after? My wonder is if you were to expand that group, and I'd have to look at statute, I don't know if Julie saw it, but is there opportunity to bring other advisory members who aren't current parents, that it may be helpful in just answering your question within a capacity?
Yeah. I think the caveat might be within the bylaws of the advisory committee. If it says that you have to be a student of the ELC, that bringing in an alumni may mean that they would have to take a parent-only class to either sit on that committee. Now, anybody could come in and give feedback, and they do. I mean,
So the old advisory council, you didn't have to be a parent with a child in the program still. So that's why I'm wondering.
asking that, yeah.
No, we make the bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I will say, I mean, there's a few people that have been parents in my tenure here that I'm really grateful to still have a personal relationship with, and they have no problem calling or texting me and saying like, what is this, right? Or please consider doing that, so. But that's a great idea, and it's definitely worth researching.
Sometimes more sustainable than parents with littles.
Yeah, they have some time.
I just had a question about like the marketing of the program and whatnot. With like you said, there's so much more competition in the private world with Edina. I was wondering, is there, what's the strategy that you have to like reach out to all the new multifamily housing units that are being built up? And because that's not the typical word of mouth cycle of Dyna moms or whatever, I'm not saying.
Yeah.
You know, like, just in general, like.
You need to get on it, it's
I really
great.
don't. But like those types of things, like are we doing anything? Because it seems like that might be an untapped resource to capture people in our district that might be available, townhouses and I just look
We
over
used to
them.
have roadshow.
Well, that's what I was wondering,
Mary
like, she was talking about the
Shire
pop-up shop, or
Yeah.
pop-up
Yeah.
classes. and I
Mary
was wondering,
Shire
like,
would show up in
Yeah.
apartment buildings and
Yeah.
Right.
recruit people.
Mary would still do that if I
I
called
know.
her. So the marketing strategy, and we're kind of working too, and when we think about coming back to with our strategic plan, to really have a tight marketing plan of how will we meet our community and all the different ways. But one of the great things about early childhood is it's very often an oral process of sharing, like, who do you like, what preschool do you like, and what we know about cultures outside of mine is that they share information orally as well. So there's a couple of different ways. The first and foremost is by being a great school, those families go out and share with their community and their culture. I mean, I can't tell you how many parents have maybe come in to meet with Tabitha to talk about a placement. Tabitha is our outreach manager. And then the next day, 3 more families will come in, right? Because they heard it from that first family. And we want that. We want that. But we also do some other things, like this current school year, we had a virtual lunch and learn program. And it's a 1-hour class in the middle of the workday. It is targeted specifically for people who are at work and can take an adult-only class. And we weren't really seeing the registrations that we necessarily wanted to see. And so Tabitha ended up creating a really quick little PDF, sent it out to 408 people, and within 1 day, we had 13 people register. And so really, we're trying any way that we can to get people or target them in a way that works best for them. All that being said, we also want to have a clear, cohesive plan of how are we going to do that. These are the 3 or 4 different marketing strategies that we're going to use.
yeah, because I was kind of thinking of the number, like what Julie talked about, the number, the capture rate compared to the number of kids that are starting. It's like, do we need to do something with the families that are in kindergarten but come somewhere else and then work backwards from people who are showing up at kindergarten, at kindergarten information night, and pushing information from there versus recruiting on the front end or in addition to or whatever.
One of the blessings of my role within the district is that I'm able to sit in principal meetings and have able to establish relationships with those leaders as well. And it is a regular conversation of who do you have coming to your school that is in kindergarten and you see mama walking in with the baby. I want to know that family. I mean, just last week I had a social worker at a school say, we have a kindergartner who has 3-year-old twins, a 2-year-old and a baby at home, and nobody has had any learning. And I was like, give me their number and their address. I will go to their house and meet them. So again, we're trying to target people who might not know that, that ECFE and ELC is here for them. Yeah.
On that note, have we as a adult learning center ever offered prenatal classes?
No.
Is it something that we would ever consider looking into?
We used to give flyers to prenatal classes.
Yeah,
at the
I think we should be out there. I would never say no.
Right.
I think we have,
I know
and
there's
one of the
some
reasons I was
existing ones,
thinking, was looking at our introduction was
Yeah,
only
and we did
because.
the yoga, pregnant.
Yeah.
There was
Baby.
a water aerobics pregnancy class
Yep.
that maybe somebody took at this table.
Yeah.
At the time.
Was it Michael?
No, I think he,
Kay did it, yeah, no,
I think
but when she said prenatal, I
I
was
think I
thinking,
went one time.
but
No, I was thinking
Okay.
like
Okay.
The,
yoga,
fitness,
like.
yeah.
Oh, yes, we
Like-
absolutely, we did actually talk about that this year. We're just, as we were preparing the catalog, but I love
was
it.
the only pregnant one there, actually.
I have 2 comments. One's also about marketing. You made a comment that I want to make sure we emphasize, is that once you get them in the building and they have a class or have an interaction, they'll want to continue.
Yeah.
So in anything with marketing, if that's your tell, right? That then how to make it as easy as possible for them to get that first thing. And so I'd only ask you to ask the question in your analysis and coming back with, how do I or how do we get that first person in the door? What are all the fabulous ideas you could possibly come up with to make it as easy as possible for someone to have that? That's number one. Number two, joys and concerns. I haven't heard that in a long time. So now this is not a comment for you, this is now a comment for Dr. Stanley. Joys and concerns, when you said that, and even though it's an ELC, CFE thing, that should be an entire district thing. The next topic we're gonna talk about, right, is about joys and concerns.
It's a mental health strategy.
It is. And what you gain from it, for those of us who remember going through that, your sanity was what was, being kept by joys and concerns. It was a safe place for you to talk about all of your fears and all the things that are in there, but also to remember that, having a kid is actually still a joyful event, even though you're wrapped out of your mind about what's happening with that. I'm only saying this because I think sometimes as we've grown out of our babies, we sometimes lose sight of that. And maybe there's a theme that could be incorporated into the overall district approach at both primary and secondary education, not just in ECFE, that we might consider doing something with that. So I'm glad you said that. And it's not necessarily a suggestion, but even from a communication standpoint, that could be something that we might want to leverage. I don't know how, I'm not suggesting how, just got a thought.
We do start most of our ELC staff meetings with joys and concerns, or hug or handshake.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of things in business, right? To where in more smaller entrepreneurial ventures, a thing called the Entrepreneur Operating System, EOS Traction, where basically you go, you ask for your best business, best personal example, and you give a number to it. That's a way in which you're talking about your joy or concern about what's going on.
Yeah.
There's many different facets of how you can do that. It works in all dynamic teams.
I know our teachers do a pretty phenomenal job of checking in with kids on that same, across the board.
I really look forward to your guys' presentation next time. That's what's up. Let us know if you need something else.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone?
Karen?
Thanks.
Great.
No, thank you for the
Thank
time.
you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good thinking.
And I don't have to touch anything.
No, you don't have to touch anything. Moving on to our board ad hoc communications committee.
That would be me. Okay. I don't have to go up there, right? 'Cause I don't want
We
to.
can do whatever you
I'm
like.
not gonna go up there. So, just a quick reminder to everybody that at our board retreat on January 29th, you had a chance to review that draft document that Director Green and I created to address one of our board goals that we approved last September around communications and engagement. So that document was rooted in the belief that our comprehensive and consistent communications are at the core of our healthy board operations, and they're in alignment with Strategy E from our strategic plan, specifically ensuring that all students and their families are engaged and well served by the communication and all other interactions with Edina schools. So at our retreat, we decided two things. One, the creation of the ad hoc board communications committee consisting of myself, Director Green, and Director Birdman, which was approved formally by the board in February. And then number two, the board gave this committee direction to come back with a more detailed plan that included recommendations, information about which items required some district resources, and a timeline. So just to structure our conversation, I want to set some of the following goals and see if we can work through them in this order, one by one, just to keep everything as clear as possible. And then at the end, I'm going to circle back so we can reflect and make sure that we're all on the same page for the next steps. Does that sound good with everybody? Okay. So I'm not going to read through everything within the document, but if you'll notice on the second page, there are some value and belief statements. So first, I'd like us to reach some agreement on those value and belief statements. Then we'll go through and any of us can offer clarification or solicit any feedback on the communications and engagement goals, which you saw in that first draft. Then offer clarification if needed and solicit your feedback on the tactics, which was pulled out of that original document and kind of given on their own individually. Get your feedback on our timeline that we proposed, and then kind of agree to some clear next steps. So with that, the first piece would be to reach agreement on our value and belief statements. So does anybody want to, do you have questions about those? Do you feel as if those substantially kind of give us framework and direction for this board communications? I want to make sure I'm using that board communications piece because this is nothing This is very separate from our district communications. So I'll open it up if anybody has any questions or comments about those.
I think it'd be good to read them out loud.
I'm gonna let you do that.
Oh.
Director Green.
Okay. So value and beliefs statements. One, we believe it's important to have accessible, equitable, and clear communication channels for board operations. Two, we believe a good communication structure builds trust, strengthens the board's decision-making abilities, and builds confidence in board leadership. And three, we believe strong and consistent communication is a tenet to operational excellence for high performance of governance, administration, and partnerships.
Does anybody feel like there's anything missing here or anything that they'd like to see phrased differently? Yes, no. Everybody good with those 3 beliefs and values?
Do they make sense?
Karen, thumbs up? All right. So then, does anybody need any clarification or want to offer feedback on those communication and engagement goals? These are the same goals. I don't think any of them have changed, except I might have added one. I don't remember which one it was. It might have just been a clarification in wording, but none of them have substantially changed since our board retreat. No questions?
No questions?
All right. How about the next section, which is tactics, approach, and timing? You'll note that the timeline that we put together is, we divided everything into 3 phases. So phase 1 with a completion date of May 1st would include some items that are actually already in process or completed. Phase 2 would be a completion date of July 1st, and then phase 3 would be a completion date of December 1st. It also includes a couple items that are ongoing, meaning things that we will continue to circle back to throughout the year, kind of like best practices is really what those are. And I would ask Dr. Stanley if you have any feedback on that timeline, just knowing that there is going to be some staffing changes. There are a couple of items that do require district resources. Any updates to the website that we may find? That would be one. And then creating an educational video about the school board. And then having a board discussion and changing some things that would go onto the board calendar. So our vision for that educational video about what the school board is, what our role is, would really be a part of that School Board 101 presentation that you'll see goes into the phase 3, where we were assuming that would be a back to school rollout. So that video could be a part of the back to school rollout, but we'd love to have the video kind of created ahead of time, if possible, if that worked with your resources.
Who's the intended audience for the video?
Pardon?
Who's the intended audience for the video? Is it families? Is it the
Families
staff?
and community members, yeah.
So can I make a suggestion that
Yeah.
she's given the opportunity to take this back to her team to
Absolutely,
discuss it,
absolutely.
so she doesn't have to respond?
Yep.
A
Yeah.
thought about timing.
Yeah, and
That was actually my question, was if she's had an opportunity to
Yeah, this has,
review this.
no, because I didn't really know if it was approved by the whole board yet, so I wanted to make sure that was there, and then that's when we take it back to cabinet. I did have a chance to read it.
so that would, we will leave that as
So would we be able to hear back by the next work session in April? Is that what we're asking for, given that you have a May 1st deadline for phase 1?
Yeah, a lot of the phase 1 pieces outside of that, any updates to the website, and that could be an ongoing thing, are things that board members, specifically yourself, myself, and Dr. Green would be a part of doing.
Okay.
And really, I think your question too, Dan, about like the audience, I think being on the committee in this process helped to just clarify what a lot of the stuff that already happens and like one place to look, because I think even the way communication is like a runaway train everywhere. And so this, at least for me, our audience, it gives me a roadmap to look at, to say, okay, I know this is what are all the different places that as board members, we can have all these touch points. And so it's just, for me, it was really clear to look at, okay, this is all the different places as a board member I would be communicating as a board member. And then secondly, I think we always have a new audience, right? We have all these new families that come in every year. And so a lot of the same questions get asked. So this is my 16th year in the district, and a lot of the same questions get circulated, like, how does it work? How does it work? Like, just continuously, because you always have those new families coming in. So this is a way to be proactive about that, to say, here's how things work, here are some places to go. I think to have some things set in stone that can be a resource. So like when we have people emailing the board, like, I want to come speak at a meeting, how does that even work? Or questions about that, we can point them to a place to give a little bit more information. I think that right now on our website, there is really good information on there. I think the information that we, as a board, how we respond, I think is working really well. I think there's a lot of really good things that we've improved on, and where we are. I think this is a way to just narrow it down and to keep it going. Because I look at this too, you know, in 5 years from now, that this would be a document that would live and breathe and be like, oh, I mean, who knows, maybe there's gonna be like a UFO that sends information from something, you know, but like, I mean, there's just so many.
Well, I was actually thinking of a different use case. I was thinking of expanding it and whether or not it needs to be a part of, like, I didn't know for Dr. Stanley's staff in the district and all the administration, HR onboarding type stuff, like about the role of the board and whether or not there's something to be said that for all the new staff to come on, whether it's the maintenance staff or the teaching staff or whatever, is that something that we need a skinnier version of this to share in there? Because I don't know for sure, but do the staff know that they can come speak in the open session of the board meetings and all that kind of stuff, or would they ever do that, or they always go up the chain of command, or how does that work when it comes to the teaching staff or the administrative staff?
That's a great point.
I think this is also be an avenue for, like I was just reading something today about, you know, school financing and how it actually works and how complicated it is. And I was talking about Minneapolis, for instance, and what they're going through. But the way that this thing described actual school finances, not specific to Minneapolis, but how they actually work, was incredibly informative. These are mechanisms that you could build in for very specific, that are always going to be this way, concepts and details around that. So I think taking what you just said, that's just one other element of how you could utilize these core things from that standpoint.
It all leans back to that clear as kind, right? Like having the information readily accessible to people, having set ways that we do things as a board. It's clear as kind for whoever, you know, comes after us or whoever's trying to access us.
And to keep it up to date and relevant, because things change.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my biggest question / concern is I want to make sure that, like I said before, Stacy and her team
absolutely
has a chance to review it, but then also give a realistic idea to us about the amount of resources it would take. So for example, I have no idea I don't really know what type of video you're thinking of, if it's like graphics heavy or something like that, and how many resources that would take, which would determine my interest in doing it, if that makes sense. Because if it's going to take a lot of district resources, then I might say we could be okay for a presentation for now, and maybe we wait for a video for next year or something like that, since we're really lean in communications resources right now. So that's my only question that I have.
How I would envision that working along with a lot of these other ones would be, you'll see in a lot of places it says, you know, CC, meaning Communications Committee, to draft whatever it is, presentation or whatever. it would be us coming back to say, based on what we are finding best practice, what makes the most sense, right? Like, would it be something similar to like the levy video, a 3-minute video that really doesn't have any human beings in it? Does it make more sense? And we're recommending that if it's possible, we'd love to have human beings speaking in it. I think we haven't gotten that far, but you know, having some parameters to come back and say, here are the options that we see. But none of these, all of these are for us, we would still, the three of us have to go back and say, here's what we think the scope of it would be. And like this first one, scan and update the website, that could mean something as simple as like 3 links need to be added, right? Like it's not a rebuilding of the website. So we would still have to come back and kind of give recommendations on what we wanted to see happen.
But I think you could say that like whatever the committee's going to do, it's still under the auspices of trying to be as lean and mean as possible to
Absolutely.
make sure that
Yep.
we're not using any additional resources that are unnecessary.
Yep.
And if we do come in a report, back to the board to say, hey, we really fundamentally believe we need to have this and here's why, then the board can decide on whether that's an appropriate thing or not and then
Absolutely.
direct
Yep.
accordingly. That's
Right,
all.
and we've pared it down. I mean, you'll notice there's actually only 4 items in which we've identified that district resources are needed. And I would say the video is probably the biggest one. That's really the big one.
And I would say the only other one that I would consider is if we're doing school board 101 presentations, would we want an administrator with us? Because the reality is, since we are defining school board, people are gonna ask administrative questions and we might get stuck saying, we can't answer that right now.
Yep.
So
and
it's just some of those nuances
But
just to think through.
these would also be,
think
so the
that's a good
school
question.
board 101 too would also be, and maybe it's not clear here, when we go to our school that we are the board rep for, right? Like
Okay.
I walk into Countryside, it's their first PTO meeting.
Okay.
Hey, I've got literally like a 4-minute little dog and pony show that I'm explaining to you about what the board is, how are we made up and how do you access us? And here's the key takeaways.
And the key
That's
goal
kind
there
of
is to have a
what-
very consistent, concise message that
Yes.
no matter who's doing that,
Exactly.
it's board approved, this is what it is.
Exactly.
to go forward.
Right.
It strengthens
And then,
us.
and hopefully then, and I love your questions,
Yeah.
Erica, because I think that's exactly right. And when does it make sense if it's a bigger audience?
Right.
That we're actually just piggybacking something Dr. Stanley is doing and it
Right.
makes sense for us to go.
Right.
Like this isn't the board's going out and,
I was envisioning like a levy.
Oh, no,
type of thing,
No,
or like a
no.
Rotary.
like we rented
No,
the auditorium.
no. Sorry,
no.
we- that's,
It's really to build it in, and actually, I mean, the goal, when we talk about like setting a goal, like for onboarding, so any new board member would come on and be like, here's your packet,
yeah,
here's a video,
Yep.
when you go to represent, like, you can explain it, all that, so that's really the goal. Ms. Gabler, do you have anything to add? Okay.
I do not.
Yeah.
I do not. Looks good.
I
It's
love
just
having
about-
people online.
I know. It's like coordinating with the communications department for the district. Like, how does that work in terms of the communication stuff we generate for the website? Like, does it get approved by communications committee on the district side, or how do those
so we
logistics work?
don't generate any of that right now. That is generated by Mary. And so I did not include in any of our scope.
Mary
I'm-
says yay or nay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, like, so the
Yeah.
stuff that we're gonna produce or create is gonna get approved by Mary.
Absolutely.
And of course, it'll be spell checked, punctuation, so that we don't have to spend time doing that.
Right, and I think that's, I'm working with, Dr. Stanley on the time, so that's,
Thank you for doing all this work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just so I'm clear on next steps is, Dr. Stanley, you are gonna give it some thought and talk with your team. And then what kind of timeline should we expect and what does
Well,
Mm-hmm.
pretty
the
quick,
rest of the
because-
board expect?
It looks like the May 1st is tight, right? And so if that's tight, I mean, really quick,
well,
It
actually,
shouldn't be
yeah,
though.
no, April, no, that's good.
Yeah,
My head's in April already. So, yeah, we'll come back together. And we'll get it back to you and I'll work with Mary and find out
Okay,
about
and
her
if we
team
need to move stuff, that's
Yeah, like
fine.
Nothing said.
I'm not.
Nothing is
Nothing
set in
is set in
stone. This was
stone.
just for something to respond to. So
Yes.
if it
Absolutely.
looks like, if you're like,
Yeah.
you know what, all this by June 30th,
Yeah.
and that's what you need to do, then that's
That's
the
fine.
recommendation
Yep.
back, and that's.
Mary's probably thinking everything by June.
The only other piece that I wanted to highlight was at the very end, we had talked, these were a couple, the A through F. These were things that came off of the tactics as a result of some of the goals that we felt were better served as discussions among the board. So these are out there for us to kind of say, if there is time on ongoing work sessions that we can create time for these dialogues, we think these would be beneficial as part of our ongoing kind of governance goals. So I can leave some of those open to maybe you taking a look at work sessions and seeing if you think some of these make sense. Do some of these make sense in a retreat format? What do we think? So I'll leave that to you. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to our action item. Do I have a motion to approve the school board statement?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Did you get that, Ann? Okay. So the governance committee has worked over the weekend, and I've worked with Dr. Stanley a lot about creating a message to the community that we feel is important to send out at this point in time. Listed in this letter are tangible actions that also that I feel are important that we take as a board, which unfortunately, the information portion of the meeting comes after this portion of the meeting, so I just want to bring those up in the information portion of the meeting. But if there are questions about those, we can discuss them as well. So I think the first question I have, or people want to discuss, is if individuals aren't comfortable sending out something at this time, you obviously have that right. And if there are concerns about that, we can address that first, and then we can talk through the actual content of the letter. The letter was created with the intent to acknowledge the incident that happened, but also make sure that as a leadership team that we are looking broadly at the expectations that we expect for our school environment and school community. I felt and our team felt that looking at this too myopically would be doing a disservice to the community. So as an attempt to merge those two messages together, to talk specifically, but then open it up broadly about this is really what we expect of our learning community. So I guess with that, I don't know, Julie or Dr. Stanley, if you'd like to add anything before we.
The only thing I will add, I do think it's making sure that we as a board want to make a statement and want to say something. I think that's an important part of this conversation tonight. And then, we've talked about it a lot over the weekend and over the last week. And I really think by not saying something, we actually are saying something also. And that's an important thing to remember. So I am in support of this, of speaking out and saying something and what's acceptable. So that's where I fall on this.
So if people have concerns or want to talk about concerns about saying something in general, I guess now's the time to talk about that.
Well, I'll just ask a couple quick questions. I didn't actually see whatever this was. It's not come to me. I haven't seen it, whatever. I've only read it as things have happened. So I'm a bit ignorant as to the explicit of what actually happened. Not that I really care about it. If it was, it is what it is. I'm more concerned about what has been the pattern Amy, Dyna, in terms of if something like this happens, if this were to happen in a classroom, what do we do under our policy? If this happens on online media, what happens in this policy? Wherever this might happen, and where's the construct of the school's responsibility and or actionable things that it can do, where does that fall from there? That, when I read through this, that's what jumped out at me. I'm totally in support of any time there's anything to where people have acted in a way that's inappropriate to other students, intentionally or unintentionally. I think coming out strong statements that we're all inclusive of what that is, I'm fully in support of that. So my questions are not about the language or the letter or whatever it is. It's more about our general approach to policies about this. I'm bluntly raising my hand. I'm ignorant as to what is within our construct to act upon in this way. And if that's not something we can discuss now, that's fine. I can trust that it's appropriate. But I would just ask for my own education, which I think is also important for the community, is we need to be clear about what that is so that we know how we're acting in terms of as the leaders of the school district about what that is, and then also as community members, whether the school district is required to do something or not, but we're feeling that we should do it anyway. That's our right to do, but I'd like to know where does it fall on those lines.
So are you asking as a board what kind of like historically has been our response?
Under the policies that we
Or-
have under the board and how we operate, when these things come up, what does our policy say as to either our required action, our desired action, or voluntary action, or whatever it might be? That's what I'm really unclear about.
So I will say that there is no policy,
Okay,
period. It's not written in policy, it's not listed in policy, and so it is, a lot of it's a judgment call.
gray area.
It's a gray area and a judgment call, and, sorry, go ahead.
Can I add something? I'd say yes and no. I'd say, we have bully policies.
Well, that part
We
is,
have
the board
harassment
response
policy.
is not. I think he was
Oh,
asking about the
You were
board
talking about
response.
the board
Yes.
response.
We
because you had said you
absolutely
wondered
have-
about our
I am also
response.
interested in the bully policy, all that kind of stuff too, but I
Okay,
was specifically asked about the board, but I am
Got it,
interested in
okay.
what you're gonna,
Yes.
might say about
Okay.
school policy related to that.
yes.
Well, I'll step back because I thought you were talking about our responses to incidents that happen through an administrative perspective, not through board perspective.
I am
So I'll
technically
step back.
interested in both, but yes, I mean, so what Eric is telling me is that from a board standpoint, there is no policy about that.
From, if you're specifically, and maybe we were thinking of two different things, so I want to make very sure that we're crystal clear about this. If you're asking about when does the board communicate and when do they not, there is no policy about that.
Excellent.
And that is, a lot of times a judgment call about when is it appropriate to and when is it not appropriate to.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah,
Wow.
but very specific, because I want to make sure that people understand that we do have a lot of policies. And I'll
Yes,
turn it over to Dr. Stanley too.
perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And to add to that too, there have been decisions in the past where the board has responded as a whole, very similar to what we're doing here.
Okay.
And made a statement or in different things, especially when something is public
Got it.
and there are questions
Got
that
it.
go beyond,
Thank you for clarifying
Yes,
that.
yep.
Now, when it comes to a behavior that happens, I also heard if it happens in school, if it happens off grounds, and, let's go with if it happens off grounds, because this one in particularly did. One of the yardsticks that we use is actually really related to a legal precedent. It's known in education called Tinker versus Des Moines. And that is if that behavior, that incident that happened off campus creates a significant disruption on campus, then that is when we would step in and look at, if we needed to have discipline or something like that. But clearly, this really does fall within those guidelines. And we look at policy, obviously, bullying, we have harassment policies. We look at that, and then we also have a student handbook as a guide that we use to really determine what student consequences would be, right? And we use that, we say, as a guide, because there may be something in there that would require, a different type of consequence that would happen. To go through protocol, and something in situations like this, and Randy, you can come up if you want to. In situations like this, principal is going to reach out to Randy and share about the situation. This is exactly what happened. If Randy feels like he needs to consult with me, he will. Otherwise, he'll work directly with the principal and determine the next steps. What would you like to add?
Just that we determine what communications are needed. Get in contact with families, families who are affected by the scenario and the situation. And then make sure that the investigation of the event is thorough. We've been talking through some of the different templates that different administrators have used in those different events, and we want to make sure that that's streamlined into a consistent frame as we move forward. Once we have all of that information, you know, oftentimes students might be placed out of school until that investigation is complete, until we have all that information. So we work with families around that. And then once we have all that information, applying that discipline per the Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, which is available on the website for families, is important for families to know that they can see that. They can see through all of the different scenarios that can happen in school now. Schools respond to that. And then lastly, it's to figure out what is the way in which we can restore some of that harm that was done through some of those restorative practices and rebuild those relationships that were damaged, and start to lay out some of the steps behind doing that and creating a plan inside the school around that. And that might involve other students, it might involve staff, it will involve the families and the students that were involved in the scenario. Those are all just very important steps to work through. Sometimes those are in a little different order depending on how that information comes through, but those are some of the key.
But to be clear, none of it is arbitrary. Everything you just described is not arbitrary.
No, I mean,
it is a specific process that you're following that has different components that go from it to try to ascertain what's happened, understand the context of what's in there, what the effect was, and then what are we doing to then remedy the situation.
Well, you know, schools have done this for a long time.
Yes.
In a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And, you know, we always reflect on those experiences and try and get better through process around what went well and what maybe didn't go well, or what we could improve the next time. And we're doing that right now. We're thinking about that right now. But unfortunately, schools, you know, are going to continue to go through those processes.
Unfortunately.
That's the business we're in, is educating and raising kids, which we love to do. We love to partner with families and community around that, and that's some of the work.
And how do we learn from this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you walking me through that.
Yep.
Are there any additional concerns about sending this communication out?
So I don't know. I've thought so hard on this. I do think it's important to send something out, and I just want to be really clear with where my struggle lies. And by me saying this, in no way, shape, or form condones any behavior that goes against the values that we stand for. But what I want to make sure we're doing is not forgetting that those children that we're talking about in those videos are also our students, and also deserve to feel like they are in an environment where mistakes can be made and growth can happen. And I am struggling to understand, do we as a board, is that important enough for us to say that just as publicly as it is to say that we don't stand for what was done? And that is something that as a parent weighs really heavily on me, that those children are still our students. And that, I don't know, I would open it up to you guys that have worked on the letter, that you've had longer discussions. That discussion happened just in my head with myself, but I feel as if that is also a part of what we stand for. And so I don't know, I would love to hear if there was talk about. Maybe this letter isn't the place for it. I don't know what is the place for it.
Well, I'm glad that you asked that because I feel the same way, that it's just like in a bullying policy, when someone is bullied, the person who that was aimed at, they're very much affected by that. But the person who's also doing it is also, something's going on with them too, as to why they did it. It doesn't matter why or the reasons are, we're not condoning it. But they're also a student, they're also a child, and that we're trying to then grow them and learn them in the proper way. So how do we take these unfortunate and very unacceptable types of behavior and really use them as a way to do that? We can't make somebody take accountability that they don't want to take.
Right. I don't know if Dr. Stanley, if you have any more experience in this, or Randy or Jeff, or how to kind of walk that exceptionally fine line. Because if I also put myself in the position to say, if I was a student that had done this, that had made this horrible mistake, and I read this letter, would I feel like I was also worth something, or that I wouldn't feel, I don't know, I'm not saying it right, but I just am concerned about that. There's a lot in the letter that feels as harsh as it should sound. But I worry about what that does to those students that are involved. That's just my honest opinion. I don't know if you have any experience in other districts with stuff like this, or.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
you know, there are lots of experiences. It is a tough needle to thread, right? Because, you know, it is, as with our parent, you know, as a parent, you let a student know that, you let your child know that you love and you care for them, while at the same time offering, you know, a harsh or tough conversation with them. It is really difficult. And what I can say is, I've probably spoken with 24 parents. Pushing it with students, probably 36 people in the past week. Spoke with JCRC today. And their perception, right or wrong, and I don't know because I wasn't here, you know, a long time ago, many things happened. The perception is that the things continue to happen because our district doesn't care. And that's the tricky position, right? How do you demonstrate that you care and care for all students? That's what I would say.
Not tolerating inappropriate behavior while not then hating the person who then had the intolerant behavior and trying to use it as an opportunity to correct them and correct everybody else that is affected by that. That's the goal. No letter is going to accomplish that one way or another. So let's just be honest about that.
Right, and that's why I said I don't have the answer as to whether or not this letter is the place, because what this letter is stating is all very important, and it's all stuff I stand by, and I would like our community to stand by. It's a concern that I couldn't not voice.
I think too, that within here, we talk about all of our students, and I hope is that those students see themselves as also deserving a place of positive learning environment, right? Like it's not, in my opinion, this letter isn't dividing those students and and all the students. We are talking about all of our students. And we have to hold the bar here. That's our job. That's what I feel I was elected to do, is to hold the bar high. And it's hard, but I hope that the students see themselves, and I hope that this letter also doesn't, the focus isn't just about the video, the focus is on behavior and what we expect. And this isn't the first time we have responded as a district either. This is an ongoing conversation. We have work to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
we all know there's been other reports of things that aren't on video that happen in schools. And it's our job to have tough conversations, be like, this is what we expect. This is what, as a board, this is what we expect. We expect our administration to hold them accountable, and our students, and all of us working together. And I really do hope that a student who has been involved in anything, on camera or not, reads this and has a check. So that's my hope. And that's why I support us sending something out and speaking up.
And we actually talked about this a little bit, and that's some of the wording actually added in is where we state, like, with the strongest terms possible, we state there's no place for this or any other harmful behavior in our Edina public school community, because it's not just this.
Right.
No harmful behavior should be.
Which, where?
Or any other harmful behavior. So we added that in as well to broaden it. So it isn't just about this, but this behavior, any other harmful behavior, like retribution or any of that is not acceptable. And then the last two sentences about all of our students, all of them. So, and then that's where, like, all the steps are really not about this incident at all. It's about what we expect of all of our students. So we, like I said earlier, it's trying to really thread this needle that is almost impossible to be
And the
perfectly
challenge is
honest.
gonna be what people are gonna focus on, which sentence,
Yes.
which words,
Right.
whatever, right?
Yes.
And if they're gonna focus on have work to do, or they're gonna focus
Yes.
on not
Right.
tolerate, or they're gonna focus on this.
Yes.
To me, it's a near impossible task to put ourselves in a statement that it's not gonna be looked at by one person differently than another. And I mean, I worry just as much about the retribution aspect as I do the impact that it has on kids, and how are we ever gonna be able to hear all those things as a board, because we're not there every day.
Right.
And I mean, like, that's truly the work that Dr. Stanley's team, the administration, the student representatives, all those things are all the things that are the most important pieces of it that are there. And I like the letter. I don't think we're piling on. That was my fear initially, is that we'd be piling on for things. And to me, I like the fact that I focus on work to do, right? I mean, I look at ways that we can do things in addition to what we're doing, and the ways that we can kind of help people understand things and whatever else. Because to me, denouncing and saying things like that, that's easy, right? The rest of the stuff is the hard work.
Yep.
And so if our job is that, our job is to help with the hard work and put things in place to allow people to do the hard work.
And that is what I think in my mind, I wanted to feel like if there was a weight in the letter, that the weight was heavier in we recognize that there's still work to do, and here are some steps we're taking. Like that, if there was some sort of a scale, that's where I would want that.
The other thing I would add to that, and I really appreciate that, is that, let's be clear, the work that needs to be done isn't just the people sitting at this table, but the work that needs to be done in order for this type of stuff to not be present in our community, not be present in our schools, it requires the work from everybody to work on this.
Right.
And that's the part that I get kind of a bit jaded, and I'll say it out loud. I get jaded about how people parse these types of things, because it then lets them hide from their own accountability to that. When you hear something that's inappropriate, whether it happened to you or not, or affected you or not, if it's wrong, what I was taught was you say something without fear. when you have enough people standing up for other people to say this is not acceptable behavior, oftentimes that behavior starts to get less. When you leave a quarter for it to be okay, for whatever excuses you want to give it that it's okay, or it was misinterpreted, or it was, people being people or kids being kids, you create quarter for that type of behavior. In order for that to be undone, everybody who's in this community who's related to this, and directly or indirectly, has a job to do. Whether they choose to do it or not, we don't control that. We can only bring voice to saying that's the real truth. And I'd like to believe that we're in a community where people would look at this and say, wow, that's totally inappropriate. I'm not sure where those kids got that from. Doesn't really matter where they got it from, but that shouldn't be okay. And we don't have to then get our pound of flesh for it, but to be clear, especially the people who are affected by it, mostly, who are in a certain whatever category that they're in, the other category needs to then be incredibly supportive of, wow, that should not exist in 2022, but it does.
Yeah, and that's why I want to make it very clear that I want every family member, student, whoever, who has been impacted by this to feel my support in this letter. I really, truly do, because
I want to make sure we bring Karen
Yep.
into the conversation.
Karen.
Hi. I have thought a lot about this, as all of you have. And I had to write down my thoughts because I wasn't sure exactly how I felt on this in terms of letter or not. And I come down to the fact that our primary purpose as a public school system is to educate, is to foster that learning. And what's happened in our community and in our communities around us is an opportunity to lean into several of our strategies in our strategic plan, especially strategy E that talks about engaging parents, schools, and communities. So what I like about this letter is that, yes, we talk about the incident, but we really talk about what we can control, and that's moving forward, and that's the education piece of it. And I do think I know we have work to do. History in our community shows that we have work to do. And perfection is unattainable. We're never going to get there. But as we strive for that excellence that we talk about all the time, we need to provide room for students to make mistakes and fail. And when our students do miss the mark, it's an opportunity for them and all of us to reflect and learn and listen and do better in the future. And I think what I would like to see, I know that the district is planning to make some more comments as well, is that we really not only are we making a statement that this is unacceptable, and that we encourage families to talk with their children what their values are, because it's tough growing up in 2022. We all did stupid things growing up, but now you can film someone doing it, and you don't have the cushion to fall back on and learn from your mistakes. So I'd like to see us say, like, these are the steps we're taking as a district in collaboration with the district. And I know Dr. Stanley's been working on some of that with her cabinet and some of those tangible things, because a statement is just a statement. It's important because people need to hear that we support them and we will not tolerate this. That's important because there's a lot of people out there that have said, there's not enough people standing up and saying that's not okay. But we also need to back that up with what actions we're going to take. So I, at this point, am on board with sending a letter on behalf of the board.
So, and since you're already off, you're non-mute again. You're really fast with that. I was going to ask you to start if there are changes you would make to the letter then.
We just got it this afternoon, so I'm a person that kind of needs to sleep on something. There's no major changes. I come at it, I'm an educator, so I'm like, how can we use this opportunity to grow as a community? No one needs to tell anyone how to parent their kids, but it is an opportunity for us to have a conversation as a community of what our values are. And social media is something we need to talk more about. And we need to talk to our kids more about it and what we stand for. So no, Erica, there's not anything major. I have to kind of read through it a couple more times. That's just how I process stuff.
Thank you. Anyone in the room?
I just had one comment on the second item about the policy review
Yes.
and that piece. When I read it, it makes me feel like that the policy is missing something that addresses, that's would cover this. And that's just that was my first read through. And I don't know if there is something that's missing or if it feels like, or, that doesn't support our actions in it.
Yeah.
So that'd be the only thing I would say is that, I agree with continuously reviewing policies because obviously the world's changing with a lot of things. But contextually, was there something that we, that the policies didn't capture?
Well, and the reality is that whatever policy you could have had, could you have prevented this? The answer, of course, is no.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it wasn't to review it that something was missed. It was more a review that is it written in the best way possible, given, like the one hasn't been reviewed for like 5 years. I don't know how, but we need to make sure that these are up to date.
Right.
But not that it would have impacted this in any way.
Yeah, and so you can kind of read that two different ways.
Yeah,
that's
a good
So were you
point.
thinking, Dan, more about something along the lines of an intentional review of district policy, starting with policy?
I don't even know what.
Or do you think we should take the specific policies out?
Well, part of me says that this policy was evaluated, or the incident was evaluated against these certain policies. And we will continually evaluate whether or not these are meeting the needs of today's world or something along those lines and say,
That's a good
that they're
change.
appropriate.
I think that's a good change. I think part of this too is like, in the context, like, there's some people who will read this and have never seen the video, have no idea, they haven't seen any media coverage, they have no idea what's happened. So I think that's a good point, because I think that's a good add.
So if I add to the end, to ensure they are meeting the needs of today's world, or was there more that I should change?
I think the comment that Dan said about the beginning, that to ensure our current policies, maybe start it there. To ensure our current policies are aligned with review policies. Because I do think that I don't want to undercut, and because I do also want to say that I think the administration did a remarkable job throughout this and your leadership. So, and responding. So, thank you.
So to ensure our current policies are meeting the needs of today's world, comma.
Oh, I had originally said, I think that this incident was reviewed against these
Yes.
policies. And then,
Can we say that?
Yes, our handbooks are written with our policies in mind. And student handbook is like the go-to item.
right, so whatever governs the behavior piece, I think is probably the.
I wonder if it's instead is the second bullet to change it to say a current review of the district students' rights and responsibility handbooks and all applicable policies. And then you could also, that would include conversations with the district's equity advisory group and superintendent student leadership groups, because that is all part of the same thing.
Is the intention though about this, again, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Is the intention of this section to somehow suggest that the policies, whatever they are, that they have certainly followed based on behavior and so on and so forth? That are we trying to suggest that there's something inadequate or inappropriate or missing or whatever it is? Or are we trying to reinforce that we have policies? Our talented administration has followed those policies to the letter to then try to address the learning and restorative processes that then go along with this. I'm just not quite sure I'm understanding what the intention of this section is related to policy. If I'm being honest, it's like, it sounds like we're trying to throw something in that says this is what we could do. The board could review our policy to see if it's appropriate or not, which is not a bad thing at all. But I'm just not saying, is it really correlated to what really
It
happened?
feels like, right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what I'm.
There have been people that have brought up that these specific policies, as well as other policies, like bullying, does not mention like racial behavior at all. And so how
okay.
can we enhance these policies to make sure that, that even though that behavior, obviously if you're bullying someone, that would fall into it.
It doesn't explicitly
But
call out.
do we have explicit language? Do we need to have explicit language? So how do we review these to make sure?
Okay,
So that.
that's a better context to the situation, okay.
Yes.
Maybe it's just adding a line then to ensure that it is.
Scratch that.
I think it is the point though that in going through this and reflecting on it, are there some things we could do better in the rights and responsibilities handbook? Potentially.
And
So
sort of the same
creating
thing
some
with
space to
policy.
have that discussion and
Yeah.
that review would be a great step.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was paying devil's
Yeah,
advocate.
no.
I'm just trying to understand, because I would hate to think that you're just talking about the
No.
policy as a means to say we're doing something, but that's not what it was. But if you're saying,
Yeah, I
yes,
think
there's
it's real.
there's
It's real.
always,
I think
there's
it's real.
always a
Yes.
process improvement that's going on here, because we constantly have new things that are happening. We want to make sure we're as,
It's real and it's beneficial. I don't know how to articulate it very well in one bullet point. To show it's real and why it's real and.
well, and maybe to Karen's point, I mean, I know that you want to take an action tonight or whatever it is, but I think it's important to make sure you do get the right language that you feel confident conveys what you're talking about. Did Lenny have participation in this letter? As part of the
Yes.
governance?
Yep.
I would admit, having Lenny here to give his insight, I would value that just because of all of his years of experience and so on and so forth, his wordsmithing that he does. But I don't have a specific edit. I don't know if you have any other edits that you think you would add?
No, I mean, just another clarification question. The student rights and handbook or responsibilities handbook, is that reviewed, would that be reviewed with student leadership groups as well? Or is that separated from the policy documents because that's not, from a feedback perspective, are they not commenting on that portion of it or no?
You know, I believe that Principal Beaton would like to have them look at that. I am going to have legal even review the student rights and responsibilities handbook so that they can give us some feedback through a legal perspective as well.
Okay.
I think for students, it's really knowing what's in there.
Yeah.
Kids don't know what's in.
Yeah, it's
the
an awareness
handbook.
issue.
I mean, I know that we post it, they're not gonna go through every aspect of that. but
I mean, we don't have them sign a document that says that they've read it, just like we all do
We
as employees.
do
and
have them,
Mhm.
and do they know that
There's some
inside
executive function skills right there.
Right? So I think definitely reviewing comment, not for them to write.
No, but just like, do you understand what this means? Like when it says this, like getting the student mindset to think, okay, I get what this means is probably more what I'm just kind of getting at.
And I only wanted to include things that we control at a board
Yeah, I know,
level.
I know.
So that's why I
That's
was
what I'm
like, I didn't want to go more into like any of the process.
I'm trying to bite my tongue.
So I don't know if you guys want to approve it with the caveat that we work on the language in the first bullet point. I personally think it's important that we get this out this week, and if not, I think it's gonna be too late.
Approve it based on an edit and ensuring that Lenny has a chance to provide his blessing on it as well before sending it out. That'd be my motion, or restated in motion. Karen, are you gonna say something?
Yeah, Erica, where are you intending, is this intended to go out in an email or be printed somewhere, or where will this be shared?
My intent was, and I believe Julie is in agreement, that it would be sent via email to our parents. If other board members have a different opinion, then
No, I think that's the right,
I
I
didn't,
think that's the right
I didn't
audience.
think it seemed appropriate to, like, a press release or anything. It's a
No.
message to our parents, and that's all.
I agree.
It's public, so it doesn't.
Does that automatically go to the staff as well?
That would be up to us.
No, but we can send it to the staff.
My opinion would be, you know, as I said, this is the whole community. Parents are obviously important, but I think it's important our staff understands our feelings about this and that we support them because they're living and breathing it every day.
I agree.
Good question.
That's helpful. Great. I wanted to know how it was being disseminated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I don't have any words, nothing. No.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, I will move that we vote on this. We have to vote via roll call, so everyone's name will be called. And are you ready, Ian?
Allenberg.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Bergman.
Aye.
Gabler.
Aye.
Green. Aye. Shaw.
Aye.
The letter is approved, and I will, pending working on that bullet point and making sure Lenny has his blessing, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I have a boatload of updates for you guys. I know you're super excited. So if everyone else wants to clear out the room, they can. So, superintendent updates are first before my updates, sorry. I jumped the gun. Do you have any updates?
You know, I don't have any relevant right now that's very specific, so I'll wait.
Okay, honestly, I don't care if you leave. You're like,
It's been a long day, everyone.
Yeah.
Take it while you can get it.
Please go.
Would anyone like a Tic Tac on the way home?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I always have to
I'm gonna be out of the country next week, and so she doesn't know this till right now. I was gonna ask Julie if she would answer the board email in case they come in. Is that okay with the rest of the board? I wanted to make sure the rest of the board was okay with that.
Fine by me. Thank you for not asking me because I'll be out of town too.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Check. I can also say, like, if it's an emergency, like, we're not responding till after break, but if it's an emergency, something like that.
That's
But
fine.
I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay
I'll
with
just respond. Erica's not able to respond right now.
Here's her cell.
The board is not available.
He's gonna be like the board chair thinks blah, 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 blah.
That is fine.
And then obviously in the letter, we referenced looking at policies 506 and 514. So I wanted to let you guys know that we're gonna be looking at policies 506 and 514, the policy committee. So that's my second note. My third note is I just want to make sure board members are attending the PTO meetings of the schools they're assigned to, and then if you can't make it, to find board members to replace them. And so given that I'm making this announcement, I want to see if anyone can go to Creek Valley in March and April.
What are the dates?
3:31 at 2:40 p.m. and 4:21 at 2:40 p.m.
I can definitely take one.
Okay, that would be awesome.
I could probably take one.
March 31st, you said?
March 31st at 2:40.
Wait, that's not gonna work because we have a policy committee.
That's why I can't make it.
I'm sorry, what were the dates again? One more time?
March 31st at 2:40.
March 31st at 2:40. Yes, I could do that.
That would be awesome. And then April 21st. You guys don't have to.
I can do the April 21st.
Okay, thank you so
That's not
much.
policy.
I feel bad. I missed the last one because of policy, I think, and then.
Does that mean you're gonna send me the information about it? or-
Absolutely.
Creek
And
Valley.
I'll make sure Lenny approves of the message I sent you.
I didn't say that.
2:20.
Yeah, 2:40. Okay. So we had a governance committee last week.
And we talked about a couple of things that we wanted to move forward with. See, she saw what I was talking about. She's like, I gotta go. One was, we talked about the interest in and importance of gleaning best practices from other school districts. And I specifically thought it would be interesting to visit districts from like our consortium schools and across the country that have like STEM programs that we're looking at doing, and maybe they have online learning. And so we talked about as a governance committee putting together like a template of, if we're going to disperse and go look at best practices across the country, what would be like the 10 things that we would want to learn? So like, you're not going and looking at the things Dan Aram's interested in, I'm looking at the things Eric is interested in, and then we can't compare the notes. So we wanted to first take a stab at things that we thought would be important, and then come and discuss them with you guys. So as a board, we have consistency and agreement that if we go and visit these are the, not that you can't talk about other stuff, but that we're actively going to get this information and come back to the board and present it, so we all can get information and know about these like 10 topics or these 15 topics that we now have this trove of information from 10 school districts across the country. So I just want to make sure you guys were okay with us working on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I think I only have one other thing, maybe two. And then also in governance, we talked about starting the process of goal setting for our board, knowing that next month, the end of next month, we have Stacy's strategic planning meeting. We're going to be having an enrollment meeting next month. Before we know it, it's going to be June and July where we're actually setting our goals. And so we just wanted to have the very start of a conversation about if you're looking at a 30,000 foot level for a district, things that we think are important to work on. What are those things? A couple of brainstorming sessions so that we can bring these ideas to you guys, and then maybe bring that to you guys, the results of Stacy's information, because sometimes we don't have time as a full board to have these really long conversations. So we just wanted to get started on that process and try to cut out some of that time and give you a document that you can reflect on. And I just wanted to make sure again that you guys were okay with us starting that process and then bringing it to you guys.
The only thing I want to add on
Yeah,
to what Chair Allenberg is saying about that is that one of the documents that we would also use is the parking lot.
Oh, yes.
That we have put a lot of things that have come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, over as another starting point, and that makes sense. And, we keep putting items on there, but like doing a really good evaluation at first run through, not making decisions, but like, here's how we kind of think the priorities are coming as we're hearing them from Dr. Stanley too. So.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I think that was it.
All right.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone. Thanks for the great meeting.
Thank you.
And we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
I'm not really going to see these on our,
No.